For Monday, March 3rd, 2025. We have three study items on our agenda tonight. Item number 1 is the city plan status update. Item number 2 is the 38th West Street Improvement Project study results. Item number 3 is the HCA Health One Rose Development Proposal. We will start our meeting, as we generally do our meetings, with public comment, and I have a number of people signed up to speak. If you would please come to the podium, introduce yourself, please spell your last name, tell us whether you live or work in Wheat Ridge. We've got some timing lights that are on the podium. You have 3 minutes to address the council. Somewhere at the end of the second minute, the green light starts to blink and then it turns to orange, and when it turns to red, if you would please complete your remarks, we'll be in great shape. We've got a number of speakers tonight. We want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak. So our first speaker tonight is Andrea Birch, and Joyce Camp is on deck. So if you'd please come to the podium.
Hi, good evening. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me in the room, my name is Andrea Birch. I'm the president at Lutheran Medical Center, now Lutheran Hospital, part of Intermountain Health. And I just wanted to take a few minutes tonight to just, first of all, thank all of you for all the years of support that you have shown to us at Lutheran as we've continued to invest and expand our services here in the community. And also make myself personally available to each one of you tonight and in the future. Should you need more information or want to discuss the information that we provided ahead of time in the packet to you regarding the HCA's request to repeal the moratorium on freestanding EDs in Wheat Ridge. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Joyce Camp and Maureen Terrett on deck.
Hi, good evening. I just want to ask a couple questions, and I hope that they get addressed during...
If you'd please introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Joyce Camp. I live in Wheat Ridge. And Camp, C-A-M-P.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to ask a couple questions about item 2, which is the West 38th Avenue improvement. And I live in Cambridge Park. There's projected to be a traffic circle right outside our front entrance. And the questions, and I don't expect you to answer them now, but I'd like them to be addressed at some point. My first question is, are there any studies, have you done any studies regarding property values and how they are impacted based on traffic calming devices right outside your door, basically? So that's the first question. The second question is that we have a lot of vehicles, longer vehicles, that come into our neighborhood. There's one of those Bluebird school buses that comes in every day. Those are pretty long. We have moving vans, and we also have, unfortunately, way too many emergency vehicles coming in to help our residents. So I'm just worried about the length of vehicles and how they are able to navigate around the traffic circles. And the last is the question probably of eminent domain, which I assume that our front entrance will have to have some property taken to have a traffic circle work right outside our front entrance. And so the question will be for you all to address at some point is it eminent domain? How does that work? And what's the compensation? And all the things that are attendant with that. So I just have questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll see if we can get those answers for you. Our next speaker is Maureen Terrett and Laura Nicholas, looks like on deck.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maureen Tarrant. That's T like Tom, A-R-R-A-N-T. And I am Vice President of External Affairs for HCA Health One. I do not live in Wheat Ridge, nor do I work in Wheat Ridge. I'm one of 12,000 employees. I know it feels like many of those 12,000 are here this evening. But I wanted to share a few thoughts about what I think is going to be a tremendous opportunity and project sponsored by Rose Medical Center for a freestanding emergency department and a health park. We have 7 freestanding emergency departments that go back actually to the 1980s in this community. And I can tell you my first stop in my over 30-year journey in this company was at Rose Medical Center. It is a phenomenal institution. I was the first CEO of Skyridge Medical Center. I met with their city council for many years to develop that institution. and then moved on to CEO of Press St. Luke's and Rocky Mountain Children's. I tell you about my personal history because I want you to know that of all the 7 hospitals that we have in this metropolitan area and over 2,500 physicians, we are the largest healthcare provider in this region with complex care and pediatric care. We serve patients from 50 states, and we serve actually a significant portion of this Rocky Mountain West region of 7 states. That's important because when we open a freestanding emergency department and a health park, which is a medical office building, it really is a portal to the community of Wheat Ridge, to the incredible array of complex care and services that this institution provides. Lutheran is a phenomenal institution. They have been my colleagues for many decades, but I think it's quite important you consider the opportunity of choice. Because we're the largest provider, we virtually have contracts with every insurance company. And as I said, we bring that vast and deep, rich of complex service lines to this community. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kara Nicholas and Brent Levy, I believe, on deck.
Hi, Kara Nicholas, and I-C-K-L-A-S. I live in Denver, but in essence, I work in Wheat Ridge because we serve a large percentage of your population here at Rose Women's Hospital. So I'm sure many of you have heard of Rose Babies. It's really part of the fabric of the Denver metro community, and we have over 100 providers who have dedicated their careers to serving women across Colorado. We deliver more babies than any other hospital by quite a margin. 49% of our patients travel more than 10 miles to get their care at Rose, and we are the market share leader in the Wheat Ridge community, serving 1 in 4 women who choose to deliver at Rose. We think that really speaks to our exceptional care and our exceptional patient experience in caring for women. And this is one of the reasons that we have forged a new partnership with Kaiser, who will now be offering Rose as their central Denver hospital for OB care. And we don't just do babies at Rose. We have all women's services. We are a comprehensive women's hospital. We are leaders in the western part of the U.S. for our breast care, doing innovative procedures, and we get patients from all over the United States. We have other services that follow the same exceptional care, GYN oncology, urogynecology, and other women's surgical specialties as well. I'm really, really proud of what we've built at Rose over the past 10 years. And really over 70 years of caring for women. And we care about the big things, and we care about the small things. And that's really who we are. So we're really excited to have a partnership with your community and to continue to serve you. I've been at Rose for 10 years, the Chief Administrative Officer of Rose Women's. I apologize, I didn't say that in the beginning. So I oversee all things women's services. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brent Levy, I believe, and Mark Kozlowski on deck.
Hi, thank you. My name is Brent Levy, L-E-V-Y. I am the chairman of emergency medicine at Rose. I'm an emergency medicine physician. I'm a Rose baby. I was born at Rose, but I've been working at Rose for 10 years. I am very proud of the work we do in the emergency department. We provide some of the best high-quality emergency care, not just in the city of Denver or the state of Colorado, but in the country. Our treatment of stroke, heart attack, trauma, OB emergencies is comparable to any outstanding world-class medical center, and it's right in your backyard. We really are invested in the opportunity to bring that world-class care throughout the city of Denver, and this project would allow us to do that. Post-pandemic, in emergency departments throughout the country, unfortunately, we've seen various headwinds that have resulted in patients having to be seen in the emergency department waiting room, which is a setup for disaster. You do not want to be seen in an ER waiting room if you can avoid it. At Rose, because of our operational efficiencies and because of the hospital, we do not see patients in the emergency department, but the reality is many patients in Denver are seen in the waiting room. And additional outlets like this project would prevent that from happening, to provide really excellent, fast emergency care to the city and county of Wheat Ridge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mark Kozlowski, I believe, and Karen Giffinger on deck.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Kozlowski, Kozlowski. I live in Inglewood. I've been a Denver area emergency physician for over 25 years, and I've worked in freestanding emergency departments for over 20 years, including serving as medical director. I've seen firsthand how freestanding emergency departments can improve access, can improve service, and get patients care earlier, and at times save lives. I just want to urge the council to support the ROSE HCA application, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Karen Griffinger and Dawn Haveney on deck. Pardon me.
Good evening, Karen Biffinger, B as in boy, I, F as in Frank, F as in Frank, I, N as in Nancy, G-E-R. I am not a member, I do not live in Wheat Ridge. I am the Chief Nursing Officer at Rose Medical Center, and I have been with HCA Health One for the last 23 years. I actually started at Rose in 2001 as a night secretary, but my journey prior to that happened well beyond that because I was actually born at Rose. My middle name's Rose. I don't know if that makes me fun or creepy, but it is what it is, so I feel like I need to share with you all. But in my tenure with Rose and HCA, I have had the opportunity to serve in a number of different roles, including med-surg, women's, nursing operations, quality and patient safety, and most recently as the nurse executive. I've also been able to receive care as a patient, a mother, a niece, and a friend. And when I reflect back on what makes Rose such a special place and why I choose to keep coming to Rose, whether it is professionally or both personally and professionally, it really comes down to our relentless focus on quality, excellence, and outcomes. This shows through our partnership with our community, our ability to provide authentic family patient-centered care, and our unwavering commitment to sustaining a culture of excellence. As a caregiver, I understand that we are only in our patient's life for a very short period of time. But sometimes those moments are the most imperative times in somebody's life. As a Colorado native, I'm also well aware that patients and colleagues have a choice of which healthcare system they choose to be a part of, and therefore our culture and our outcomes do matter. We are people taking care of people. I'm beyond proud of the culture that we have created within Rose, and I look forward to expanding our Rose family into my Wheat Ridge family. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dawn Haveney and Amanda Kelly maybe on deck.
My name is Dawn Hovanek. It's H-O-V-A-N-E-C. I've been a nurse for 25 years, and I've spent 18 years in the ER in various sizes and roles. I've been the director of emergency services at Rose for the last 3 years. And during my ER career, I really enjoyed excitement, fast pace, all the things that come with the ER. And what I enjoy the most is the human connection that you get to have every day with patients and staff. Prior to starting my current role, I was the manager of freestanding ER in a community in southwest suburbs of Denver. I live in Inglewood. I should have said that, sorry. I don't live in Wheat Ridge. During my time there, I saw the value of a freestanding ER and what access to emergency care can really provide to a community that didn't have easy access otherwise. Everyone really deserves access to high quality care. I'm proud of the nursing care we provide to our community in the ER at Rose. We really focus on compassion, quality, patient-centered care. In 2023, we received a Lantern Award from the Emergency Nurses Association. This award is given to fewer than 1% of all ERs in the nation, and it recognizes ERs that demonstrate exceptional and innovative performance in leadership, practice, education, advocacy, and research. And it's a true testament to the nursing practice and delivery of care that we provide every day. Over the last year, we've continued the Rose reputation by reopening our Central Park freestanding ER, and many of the patients from the Central Park community provide comments and feedback about their care, and it is overwhelmingly positive. Many of their comments speak to being heard and seen by the care team, which is what I am most proud of. Last week, I received a call from a patient who wanted to share her experience. Her name was Sharon. Sharon was a retired nurse, and we all know nurses can be the toughest critics when it comes to healthcare expectations.
She was visiting her daughter in Colorado when she became ill and in need of emergency care. She had nothing but glowing remarks about the compassionate care she received in our ER, and she said she could not return to Illinois without sharing her wonderful experience and how proud she was of the nursing profession. So thank you so much for your consideration this evening and for letting me share my experience and the value that we place on patients in the community from our emergency rooms at Rose.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Amanda, and Amanda, I'm going to let you pronounce your last name, and Jeffrey is on deck.
Hi, my name is Amanda Kelly Doris, Kelly-Dorris, and I am a Wheat Ridge resident. And I thank you for this evening in order to speak with you about the vital healthcare need in our community. I've been a community member since 2010 when my husband and I married and moved into his grandparents' house that's actually just down the street. We still live in that house, and we bought it from his grandparents who bought it in 1952, and we call it home along with our 4 children. I'm here to discuss the benefits of establishing a freestanding emergency room and how it can significantly improve the access to emergency medical care for my family and for our residents. Our community is growing, and so is the demand for emergency health care services. Current hospital emergency rooms can be overcrowded, leading to long wait times. We need more accessibility closer to the east side of Wheat Ridge now that Lutheran has moved. The last time I was seen at Lutheran, I spent 6 hours in the emergency department between being triaged and discharged. A freestanding ER can offer immediate, high-quality emergency care without delays and can help alleviate pressure on local hospitals. Trust me, I know the importance of being able to have quick healthcare access, especially with 4 kids. It also gives us the opportunity to create new healthcare jobs and support local businesses, which in turn will enhance property value and attract more residents seeking convenient healthcare access. I'm a 3rd-generation nurse who has worked at Rose since 2004, but I also have been a patient who delivered all 4 of my kids at Rose and can speak from my personal experience. There is no other hospital I would entrust with my family's care, nor another hospital I can imagine calling home. The care and diligence I have received as a patient reassures me that the quality of care will mimic the same standards and be what our community deserves. We deserve accessible, high-quality, high-value emergency care. By supporting the development of a freestanding ER, we can save lives, improve healthcare accessibility for our residents, and strengthen our local community. I appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey is our next speaker, and Julie Pellegrin on deck.
Good evening. I'm Jeffrey Kay, spelled K-A-Y-E. I am not a resident of Wheat Ridge. I have trusted Rose, and specifically Rose's emergency department, for my care. Family and friends have trusted Rose, and specifically our ED, for their care. And I've also had the honor of being the Director of Chaplaincy Services at Rose for the past 25 years. Long before the buzzword, which we now have today, patient-centered care, became in vogue in healthcare communities, Rose has walked the talk. And literally and even figuratively, this has been our motto. Literally etched in granite as you walk through the doors of our hospital, you have the following motto, which is truly our mission. Foremost in our hearts and minds is the commitment to our patients. Therefore, we assume responsibility for everything that affects their care. That is the ethos of who we are as a hospital and healthcare community. Patient-centered care, ensuring dignity, uniqueness to each and every patient, making sure that we reach out to meet all the needs of the patient. This has been a part of the fabric and DNA of our hospital, a hospital which was founded in honor of a native son of Colorado, who was a World War II hero who died on the active battlefield, General Maurice Rose, but also a hospital which needed to be formed because physicians could not freely practice medicine because of who they were, their identity. But instead of being mired in a sense of victimization, these doctors, together with the community, banded together to ensure that every person would have free access for medical care, and that the entire community would be serviced by this new entity, which is Rose. Rose today is truly the best of all worlds. It is a community-based hospital, and yet at the same time has the resources, the connection, the scale, which is HCA Health One. We want to bring that service, that care, that dignity to the citizens and residents of Wheat Ridge. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Julie Pellegrin, and Doran Volsky is on deck.
Good evening, Mayor Stark, members of the City Council, and the city staff. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name is Julie Pellegrin, P as in Paul, E-L-E-G-R-I-N. I'm sorry to kind of break in the flow, the Rose flow here, but I spoke with you at your February 10th council meeting and voiced my objections to putting a traffic circle there at 38th and Miller. At that time, and still, I didn't see for sure why it was necessary, and I continue to be concerned that it could cause traffic backups because of the gate at the entrance to our community. I also am concerned that a traffic circle would be difficult for many of the residents in our community, most of whom are older, to adjust to. Most of us are not used to using traffic circles, and they can be confusing and intimidating to drive through. It's difficult to look over your shoulder, judge the speed of oncoming traffic as it enters a curve, and accelerate to merge into the circle. People would probably adjust eventually, but how many accidents would occur before that the adjustment happened? Also, I understand that the circle would be designed to allow fire trucks, buses, other large vehicles to be able to either drive over the edge of the circle or perhaps drive through the center. And if that's the case, then I'm not sure that the circle would effectively slow traffic, because if large trucks can go through with no curb in the middle, then I'm guessing others will be going through with no curb in the middle and not slowing down. If the goal is really to slow down traffic, there may be better ways to accomplish that goal. Traffic light at the intersection would slow things down, make it much easier for people to turn or to pull onto 38th off of Miller. Or if speed is the concern, installing traffic cameras and enforcing the speed limit with tickets would possibly be effective and also be lucrative, make some money for the city. At this point, we don't know how big the circle would actually be and how far it would come up on Cambridge Park property. We have a small guardhouse at the gate now that houses the antenna that receive the remote opener signals, and there's a keypad that delivery trucks use to open the gate. It seems like we would probably have to at least move or relocate both of those, the guardhouse and the keypad, incurring significant costs to our HOA. We've recently circulated a petition in our community. There are 107 homes in Cambridge Park, and at this point, between 85 and 90 residents have signed on in opposition to the traffic circle. Others are waiting to receive more information before they decide whether to sign. Specifically, we would like to know how big the circle will be and whether it will require us to move the guardhouse and keypad, how much room there will be in the driveway between the circle and the gate to allow cars to wait for the gate to open, whether the design for the circle can accommodate the existing right lane turn off of westbound 38th into Cambridge Park, whether a traffic light instead of a circle is an option, and we'd also like to know whether there are traffic studies available to us that actually demonstrate that traffic circles slow down traffic, and what the other effects of a traffic circle are, especially the number of accidents, including accidents involving pedestrians and bicycles. We'll continue to participate in the public planning meetings, and we look forward to working with you and the project staff to find a solution that accommodates your goals and the needs and concerns of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Doran Volsky, and we have Terry Urbanowski on deck.
Good evening. My name's Doran Volsky. I'd just like to basically say ditto to what Julie just said. She said almost everything that I wanted to say. Yeah, I think there are a lot of people in Cambridge Park that are really concerned about this traffic circle. I don't really understand why there's a need for it. As of right now, I don't really see a problem there. I don't see a reason for it. I think it's a big expense. I have no idea what it's going to cost. But you know, the one thing I think about is why are you doing this when you got such a debacle going north on Wadsworth? Look at how long this has been going on, and you're going to start another project. How long is it going to take? Because as far as I'm thinking, this debacle on Wadsworth, which has basically caused a lot of businesses to implode, lives to be affected. I mean, it's been really bad. And we're supposed to trust the city of Wheat Ridge to do something responsible on West 38th, where a lot of older people are going in and out. I don't have any confidence in you. And I think a lot of people that live there, they're against this. So I'd like to have a real good reason why we need it. That's all.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Terry Urbanowski.
My name is Terry Urbanowski, Urbanowski, and I'm a Wheat Ridge resident. I've been a Wheat Ridge resident for 37 years. 36 of those were at 38th and Wadsworth in Melrose Manor. And a year ago, I moved with my husband down to Cambridge Park. And I am one of the people that has a differing viewpoint. I think roundabouts are very common throughout the metro area. They have them in Golden, they have them in Arvada. I went through 3 in Littleton today. I think they do exactly what they're intended. I think they slow the traffic down. They allow a continuous flow, and I think they're a great thing. I have traveled extensively on the East Coast, and I have seen a number of large volume traffic circles in DC and different areas. They work great. I have never seen any traffic accidents in them. I'm sure they happen. I went 2 years ago to Italy, and you cannot drive through a community in Italy without going through multiple traffic roundabouts. I think they work great. I think they do exactly what they're intended to do. And I am in 100% support of the 38th Avenue plan. I think it'll be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes all of the people that we have signed up in the city council chambers. I have one person that signed up online. I want to see, we have Dennis Garreau signed up online. Dennis, if you're with us, would you please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and then you'll have 3 minutes to address the council. Dennis, I'm not hearing any audio from you. Have you been able to unmute yourself and try to join us?
He's unmuted. I'm not sure why there's no volume.
We're not getting any audio through there.
How about now? There we go.
Okay, we hear you now. Please speak up. You're a little bit soft on that first intro.
Thank you. My name is Dennis Garreau. I've been a resident of Wheat Ridge for the past 1 3/4 years. I registered my comments earlier in the day, so hopefully you have those in front of you or available. First of all, it's my hope in the process that you will explain the need for the traffic circles beyond just perception, but rather to the point of some study that demonstrate there is indeed a speed problem or a traffic volume problem. I haven't seen anything like that, and hopefully you'll provide it. Secondly, I too have traveled in Europe and Italy in specific, and traffic circles do work well there, but that hasn't been my experience here in the U.S. and particularly in Golden or Arvada. If you try to use a traffic circle on Old Golden Road, you'll notice that the traffic on the larger street tends to assume the right-of-way and doesn't obey the yield sign like the traffic off the smaller streets are expected to. You'll see the same problem on Grandview Drive in Arvada at the intersection with Balsam. You have a larger street and a smaller one, and there's either a lack of education or a lack of will to abide by the pattern where all four entering streets are required to yield to traffic in the circle. But that doesn't seem to be the way it operates here. Further, I think we have too small a layout of space to install the number of traffic circles you're talking about. Too tight a turn, too small a radius to accommodate traffic from several directions at any one time. And finally, I'm concerned about the access into Cambridge Park off of 38th, where the distance between 38th and the gate is already minimal for vehicles waiting a pass approval at the keypad or larger maintenance vehicles waiting to come in. The backups there are frequent, and room is needed to be able to activate one's remote to get gate opening and hopefully not be out in the midst of a traffic circle while you're waiting. I think the backups might make the situation worse than it is at present, and I'm looking for more information from you. I think the need should be established before we try and implement the fix.
Thank you, Mr. Garreau. Your time has expired. Would you please conclude your remarks?
I think you've heard all that I need to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes all of the speakers that have signed up to speak either in person or online. We want to thank all of you very much for coming and talking to the council. We truly appreciate your participation in our process. So with that, we will move to agenda item number 1. This is a city plan status update. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lauren, you introduced, or Ella, you're introducing? This is our third?
Our
Fourth update.
Yes.
On our update to our comprehensive plan, and made a lot of progress. We have CZB here this evening to help us present. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. But Ella, you want to start off?
Yes, I will start us off. I'm Ella Stevie, Senior Planner. It's great to be back. I'm joined here by Eric Amy and Thomas Eddington from CZB. I know we have a long agenda, so I'm just going to jump right in. Lauren has pulled up our presentation. So tonight we're going to, we haven't been here since September, so I'm going to give a brief project overview just as a reminder. We're going to talk about what we heard very briefly from the first 2 phases and then a little more from the most recent one. We're going to talk about planning for character in Wheat Ridge. We'll stop and have a little discussion then. We're going to talk about implementation, have another discussion with some questions then, and then I'll wrap up with just some high-level next steps. Next slide. So to start with our project overview, as a reminder, we're here working on our new comprehensive plan for Wheat Ridge called the City Plan. So the City Plan should articulate the community's vision and shared values. It should identify priorities for the future, provide a framework for decisions for years to come, and guide action and investments. Next slide. So this is our 4th phase of engagement. So we are most of the way through this. The next time we meet as a group, we'll have a draft plan in hand. So it'll feel really close to the finish line then. So what we've heard so far, in phase 1, which was last spring, we saw emerging consensus from the community that we know what's working, and we also know what we want for a stronger future. In phase 2, which was last summer, the community confirmed the core values, principles, and priorities that we presented. In phase 3, which was last fall, the community shared how you like to get around and how you'd like to see the city manage new development. So in phase 3, we had over 170 attendees at the open house, and we got over 230 responses online.
As part of phase 3, we also went to Wheat Ridge High School. So community engagement specialist Ashley Holland and I worked with 6 classes at the high school, and we heard from over 100 students. We got a lot of great information, and we also confirmed that high school students want a lot of the same things that adults want. They want places to hang out with their friends. They want an easier time getting around without a car, for example. I also learned that you should always thank your teachers. I already knew that, but it was an amazing day that was truly exhausting. So thank your teachers. In our last study session here with you all in September, we dived a bit deeper into that phase 3 content. So we heard about the place type framework, and we discussed how we can facilitate peaceful coexistence with new development and existing neighborhoods. We also talked a little bit about the proposed mobility network. So the map on the left shows how people shared during phase 3 how they want to get around Wheat Ridge. That's compiling all of their little paths that were drawn and how they like to get around in different ways. So we'll use that input to update the proposed mobility framework, which you see on the right, to make sure it responds to how people want to get around the city. Then we asked people to choose the 3 most important items that must be addressed when new development is proposed. And this is what we heard. So parking and traffic generally got a lot of responses, followed by building height, landscape and streetscape, and then physical and visual separation. There's a little more information about what people shared that was on our boards at the public open house 2 weeks ago and is now currently online on the project website. So that's just a snapshot of what we've heard so far. I'm going to hand it over to CZB to talk about character.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us back. Nice to be here again. We'll talk a little bit about planning for character in Wheat Ridge. As you all know, some of what Ella just shared and what we've talked about in previous conversations that we've had is that Wheat Ridge pretty much likes itself the way that it is, and it likes the character that it has. There are a number of components of character. Different people will have different definitions, but a lot of what we're focused on is physical character. We're talking about a comprehensive plan, after all. We're talking about something that's going to inform development regulations. And so all those other things that go into character are very important. What we want to talk about here a little bit tonight is that physical character and the things that, that shape that. We also know that while the city likes, the residents of the city very much like the city that they have, it's also inevitable that change is going to occur. So there will be development, there will be additional things happening. So as that happens, how do we make sure that those things happen in a way that doesn't fundamentally undermine who Wheat Ridge is? So when we talk about character in Wheat Ridge as it relates to the city plan, what is it that we're trying to achieve? We're talking about the evolution of our places, understanding incremental change, maintaining the character of distinct areas with their own look and feel. We talked about this concept going back, I think, maybe to our very first meeting about a year ago. Maybe it was April. Janice, I think it was your phrase, patchwork quilt, that made its way into the city plan. It's got a starring role, so thanks for that. And so how do we make sure that within the patchwork quilt, each of those patches is evolving incrementally to be the best version of itself? We've talked about peaceful coexistence for a number of months, ensuring that new development peacefully coexists with existing neighborhoods. So again, new development is inevitable, but how do we make sure it's going to fit in? Improved connectivity and access is another important thing here, how to get around town more easily. It's especially for the non-motorized modes, by foot or on a bike. And then making great places. So improving the space between the buildings, enhancing experience for places where we want to spend time. I think, Scott, it was, I've got notes from an earlier conversation where that was something that you raised. It was very important, is special places, great places. How do we work on making more of those in Wheat Ridge? So that's definitely a box we want to check. How we've begun to think about this is that, you know, we're when it comes to physical character in Wheat Ridge, we're kind of shooting for these goals, or these objectives, things that we want to achieve. And we have a number of tools or toolkits that we can deploy to get there. So we have what we call use tools, which are essentially uses, so how and for what properties and buildings are used. you all probably know, these are things that are largely controlled in the zoning code. There are form tools. These are physical in nature, so the size, shape, placement, buildings and parking and landscaping, other physical parts of development. What we've named Going Places tools. Going Places tools is really the mobility toolkit. That's about getting from here to there. It's the infrastructure and the treatments for traveling around the city. And that is contrasted with Staying Places tools. So these are many of the same items, infrastructure, street treatments, but it's not aimed at just simply getting from here to there. It's aimed at enhancing the place where we are. Oh, sorry, guys. So we've got use tools for uses, form tools shaping the physical nature of development, Going Places tools, which is really about getting from here to there, and then the Staying Places tools, which de-emphasizes getting from here to there and emphasizes the experience of being in a place.
And I just want to jump in one point on these. A lot of the tools that Eric just gave a high level that we're about to go through in a little more detail, Wheat Ridge already uses many or most of these. So when we're talking about them in the city plan, it's not to introduce a new set of tools. It's really just to help us guide for the process of reviewing the ones we have to figure out what we need to tweak or maybe add. So a lot of what you'll see will sound very familiar.
Yes, thanks, Ella. Some of this is going to be kind of planning and development 101, so you know, it's fine. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. So what we want to do is just take you through a couple of examples of these use form, Going Places and Staying Places tools so we get a sense of what we're talking about. Talked a minute ago about these use tools, and these are just some broad categories. We're talking about residential uses, commercial, retail, civic and institutional, like your government buildings, your schools, your churches, et cetera, your industrial uses. Again, things that are largely controlled in the zoning code. Some examples of our form tools. These are only a few. This is not the comprehensive set of things that we can control in our development regulations, but things like height and bulk plane. So how tall is a building, but also as a building gets taller, how does it step back for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is sort of respect for the neighboring properties. Setbacks, screening and landscaping. So how are different properties separated from each other? How are different kinds of uses separated from each other? Our parking regulations as well. So is the parking in front of the building? Is the parking behind the building? Is the parking on the side of the building? These are all things that we can regulate, and they all have a role to play in shaping the physical nature of development. Some examples of our Going Places tools. Clearly, pedestrian infrastructure like sidewalks. In this particular example, a detached sidewalk. You can also have attached sidewalks. You can have other kinds of sidewalks like a multi-use trail. That's for pedestrians. The variety of travel lane configurations for motorists. So here you've got one that's very prevalent in Wheat Ridge, kind of the 2 to 3 travel lane cross section. There are narrower, there are wider, comes in a variety of forms. Your bike lanes, which come in a variety of forms as well. Sometimes they are, or your bike infrastructure, I guess I might say, all the way from sort of shared lane markings, that's where a cyclist is in the flow of traffic, all the way to a protected, kind of walled off bike lane that's very separate. And then a bus dedicated lane is an example of how transit is treated as well. And so again, these Going Places tools are really about getting from here to there. And the last collection of tools here are Staying Places tools. Again, this is really about enhancing the sense of place, making it a great place to hang out. So we do that with our sidewalk requirements. You may very well treat that sidewalk differently in certain like business districts versus the way you might treat it in front of your house or another location in town. You might want to make it wider, make it more inviting for pedestrians, for staying, for lingering. Lighting and street furniture standards, same thing. You may scale your street lighting differently depending on what you're trying to achieve in any given location. And so you may have more pedestrian scale lighting in a place where you're trying to enhance the pedestrian experience versus if you are emphasizing traveling through, not staying, you may have a different lighting treatment. Frontage improvements. This is one I want to stay on for just a second. As we all know, Wheat Ridge was really developed in the middle of the 20th century, late 20th century. So a lot of our commercial corridors have a lot of front yard parking. And that front yard parking is useful at times, but it also detracts from the sense of place, detracts from the pedestrian experience if you're walking in front of those sites. And so there are treatments that can be put in place that can both preserve the front yard parking and also enhance the pedestrian experience and sort of the sense of place. And we're going to spend some time in the city plan on that concept because we think it's very important here in Wheat Ridge. And then finally, in our staying places toolkit is street tree and landscaping requirements. So obviously the number of street trees, how far apart street trees are, landscaping requirements that we might impose, those are all things that can enhance the sense of place as well. And we're stuck. Oh, no, there we go. Okay. So for example, we'd like to use this set of images here to explain, again, in case it's not clear yet, the difference between the going places tools and the staying places tools. And what we have here are two examples, top and bottom, of a standard 66-foot right-of-way, and just two examples of the way you might sort of mix and match different components within the right-of-way depending on what you're prioritizing. And so in the top example, where we are prioritizing getting from here to there with the going places toolkit, we're talking about making sure that we have bike lanes on both sides of the street, that we have sort of the basic infrastructure necessary for a variety of modes of travel. So clearly we have cars, clearly we have pedestrians, and clearly we have cyclists. And it's about moving up and down the street at this point, whether, independent of whatever mode you're choosing, making sure that you can get up and down the street. And this is not the only way you could obviously design a street, this is simply one example. And so we're deploying those tools that we just talked about a minute ago here and mixing and matching in this way because we're emphasizing just the travel component. If we drop down to the one below that, and we're talking about the staying places toolkit, we're really talking about maybe like a walkable business district, a place that's pretty vibrant, it's got a lot of on-street life, maybe have restaurants with outdoor seating, outdoor dining, et cetera. And so we're really trying to enhance that user experience. We're really trying to create a place where people want to be and hang out, not just pass through. And so when that is our goal, we're talking about using some other tools or deploying these tools differently. So for example, you will see, if you look on the bottom, sort of kind of the bottom right-hand corner, we've got on-street parking. We don't have on-street parking in the example above because on-street parking is something that's going to be in our staying places toolkit. It's going to emphasize businesses at that location. It's going to do some traffic calming as well. So it's going to slow things down. That's one reason why a couple of reasons why that's there. We may have parklets, or we may have sort of reclaimed some of the street itself. For example, if you look to the left-hand side, just past that leftmost car, you may have some outdoor dining, again, reclaiming some of that space in front of the curb to use for those purposes. We're going to emphasize, you can see the street trees there. We may emphasize those differently or at a different location within the right-of-way, whereas in our going places toolkit, we may have our street trees placed farther away from the curb. We may have them closer to the curb when we're doing placemaking in the staying places toolkit. So this is just a couple of examples of how we might mix and match, these different tools, use them differently when we're trying to achieve different aims. We'll talk more about this in a second.
Can I hop in just to, I think what Eric said definitely came up a lot in our steering committee meeting when we discussed this, that this is simply trying to illustrate the trade-off conversations that we have. You could have the going places tools and still have on-street parking. You could have the staying places tools and still have bike lanes, for example. So I just want to clarify that being in one camp or the other doesn't mean that elements of what you're seeing on the screen have to be that way. This is just to illustrate you have a set right of way. Here's some of the kinds of trade-off discussions that you guys have in this body all the time. So I think it's important to note that cities need both kinds of places. And we know that based on the mobility framework that we saw earlier quickly in this presentation, but in more detail last September. And because a network of bicycle and pedestrian facilities is one of our 4 priorities in this plan, we will, for most of the city, we will be we were proposing that we'd be prioritizing those going places tools and then applying the staying places tools as appropriate. What we're going to go on to the next slide to show a few places where we want to flip that and think about it a little differently.
And I want to emphasize, I think the point Ella's making, which is not that it's an either or in every situation, but rather every time there is a question about capital infrastructure investment or extractions from private development, it may be that we could sit around a table and say, we want to have all the bike lanes, we want to have all the on-street parking, we want to have all the 8-foot wide sidewalks, we want to have all the street trees. And it may not be able to get all of that because it simply won't fit. So then the question is, all right, well, what is it we're really trying to achieve here? And then let that drive the selection, of the right combination of these things, of these tools. That's all. And we're sort of creating this, it's not a completely false dichotomy, but it's a little bit of a false dichotomy. And we're just using this to make the point tonight. Okay, and as Ella said, so how we apply these going places tools or staying places tools depends on the location. We have taken a stab at looking around the city and coming to a preliminary determination of what are the places where we think the staying places toolkit really is the most important. And these locations are what we term gateways and gathering locations. So these are the places where you really want to make sure you're doing good placemaking, where we think people are going to want to hang out, or do want to hang out now clearly, or we think they will want to in the future and spend more time. And so these are places where, again, it wouldn't be an absolute rejection of any of the going places tools, but rather an extra emphasis on the application of the staying places tools. Ella, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that covers it. And I think we're hoping that this kind of concept can help us in decision making in 2 ways. One, to kind of focus that trade-off discussion that we often have anyway, and help us just make decisions about investments in our public spaces, that especially the ones that have limited right-of-way. And second, we have limited funding, and so this would also help us prioritize locations where it can have the biggest impact, to kind of help us make hard prioritization discussions to get the most out of our limited funds. We have some questions up here, but before we dive into these, I'm curious, and I want to give you all a moment to respond if you have questions, if this makes sense, kind of your initial thoughts on what we've talked about.
Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for being here tonight. I'm just wondering, when you are on your map that has the gateways and gathering locations, and you have identified with the little reddish orange dots some areas, why was the rec center not necessarily included in that? And I notice also, and then part B of this question is, I notice a lot of these are, there's commerce, like heavy commerce in these areas, like restaurants and stuff like that. Why were the parks maybe necessarily not also added in that along with the rec center?
So I think well, first of all, one of the questions we do have is, we're asking this to the public too, are we missing areas? So this map is not necessarily complete, and we can definitely talk about that. The rec center also came up in our steering committee discussion. I think it wasn't initially on there because that wasn't on our radars as a place that has a really limited right-of-way where we're having to make hard this or that decisions because we can't get what we want. But that could certainly be added. I think a lot of them are commerce because those are the places where, thinking about these tools where generally people do want to stop and stay. I think one distinction too is that both the going places and the staying places are great places.
They're just great in different ways. And I think, because people had asked about like residential strips as well. And so we were trying to emphasize like those will be great places. They just won't be, you can't have that just kind of dilutes the resources, a very specific resource for a very specific outcome, a little too much to be effective. So the other areas would still be great places, not just necessarily ones where we want to first get kind of the top shelf of all the staying places and then figure out what bike lane works there. It's just flipping the prioritization a little bit. We do have 44th adjacent to Anderson Park. So that is one. It does have some commerce, but its adjacency to the park there is really what kind of pushed it onto the list for us. But we're certainly open to suggestions of this map. Both, are there places that don't feel quite right, or other places like the rec center that should be on here as well?
I think it's also worth pointing out that this is one kind of place that is a destination. So these dots are one kind of category of destination. And then but they're not the only category of destination. So we got that specific question many times, I think, at the open house a week and a half ago. And I think as we look at putting the finishing touches on the mobility framework, there's a lot of good question to ask is like, okay, mobility from where to where? And that's a big part of the mobility framework. And so we need to make sure that we're emphasizing all of our important destination places, kind of regardless of what category of destination it is, if that makes sense. Yeah, for sure.
Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. And kind of on that same subject, do you guys have any idea how Wheat Ridge compares per capita on these places? Are we like average? Do we have more? Do we have less? And I'm assuming this is kind of the perception of what these are right now. This isn't here's potential places, but I'm just wondering, like, where do we fit if we were to compare ourselves to just on a per capita, pick a city, or some places. Like, do you feel, and you may not know the exact answer, but I'm just wondering, like, does this feel like proportional to our city, or should we maybe perhaps more?
I think that's a hard question to answer, Scott. Maybe I'll try it this way. I think a lot of the way that we're thinking about these gateway and gathering locations is sort of like for lack of a better description, because it doesn't fit all of these, but like kind of the walkable, either the neighborhood business district or Main Street, right? And it's something Wheat Ridge has been working on for a while, and is making progress, different locations, different speeds toward different outcomes. And there are a lot of communities in America that have zero. So they don't have it. It's not a thing that they have. And there are a lot of communities who probably have a bit of a surplus. And the reasons why they would have so many have to do with, market type and size and population and how many housing units they have per each one of those things. You know what I mean? So I think probably trying to do apples to apples comparisons is pretty tricky. But I would say that the opportunity that Wheat Ridge has to keep doing this work over time is really strong, and particularly as market conditions change, as population increases a little bit, as households increase, and as CIP work continues. I think that Wheat Ridge can get better and better. Can you get can you maximize every single one of these locations like tomorrow? Doubt it. But over time, with the right kinds of efforts, I think that some good things could be done for sure.
Thank you for that answer.
Mr. Bob?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that, Scott, if I could. I think keeping Wheat Ridge in perspective or focused on the place issue, I've been here long enough to know that we heard that for years, right? That Wheat Ridge does not have a place. And I think all 6 of these on this map are fairly new places for Wheat Ridge. So in my mind, I think we're moving ahead with places. The Clear Creek Crossing is a new place. 26 Kipling is really a new, vibrant place. The G Line station hopefully 38th Avenue is, we've been working on as our place, right? But I think it was a great question, and I think seeing this now, that we have at least 6 potential places in a 10 square mile, I think is a big improvement from if you live for long enough to realize we've never had a place, right? Or even if you've lived here forever, I think you would agree.
Thank you. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, CZB, for all your good work on this. So I have a couple questions, but I want to kind of leverage the conversation that's going right now. So when I look at this, and I agree with Patrick, it is exciting to think of us as having these more like sticky destinations and how we really center, and prioritize our city's resources and planning around that. I'm curious, a lot of them are kind of like little blips. And how are we balancing blips versus the concept of like corridors and districts in this? Because when I think about what makes Wheat Ridge great, like some of the really strong places, like Councilmember Hoppy mentioned, like our rec center and our junior high, like we've got these like concentrations where we've got a couple of places together. And so I think maybe there's a slight overlay in this, in that maybe looking at some district-y places that aren't like big districts, but where we have a hub of existing like somewhat sticky places where we have like existing civic infrastructure that isn't going away and hopefully gets reinvested, that we're ensuring that idea of going and staying like applies in those. Not necessarily from the concept of like really reimagining corridors, but making sure that the priorities around like bike and pedestrian travel, like non-vehicular travel still work. And so that if someone goes somewhere within that sticky district, it's easy for them to go somewhere else within that sticky district. So I think that concept could really like enhance this a little bit without necessarily having to extend what we're looking at in terms of like capital investments, but rather ensuring our existing warmly sticky places like continue to really thrive. And then I have something else, but it's more of a comment than a question, but welcome any follow-ups.
I think what you just said about the kind of moving around in the sticky places, I think as we're discussing this in this kind of phase 4 of engagement, I'm realizing how important it's going to be to overlay this with the mobility network too. So we're seeing not just the sticky places, but we're also seeing the bigger scope of mobility improvements that we want to make and what that looks like together. Because, for example, if we realize that a trade-off that we have in a sticky place is that we don't have room for quite like the top shelf bike lane, then we want to make sure that we have bike parking, we have bike signage, we have really good connection into the rest of the network, so that if you aren't coming to there, you're passing through, there's still a really great seamless way to do that. So I think there are a lot of reasons, including what you just said, that seeing those two together is going to be really helpful in how we present them in the plan.
Great. And then I think the next question I have that goes into this is, so I really like the idea of this toolkit, and I really appreciate the frameworks that we're looking at tonight. In the like going places, as someone who works professionally in transportation stuff, as we apply the toolkits, like how are we integrating other values around like speed versus safety and, different types of road users? So I know that's another layer that's probably forthcoming, but there's a second set of values that gets integrated into this. And I was thinking around like personal safety. We have a lot of hospital workers in the room tonight who I think Wheat Ridge is becoming hospitalier. And in that, I think really doubling down on our, commitment to safety for all. We'd love to reduce those visits to the emergency rooms. I think everyone agrees. So I'll be curious as this moves forward how we like integrate those types of values into these toolkits. And then my other one, what was it? I think you answered my other one. I think I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation thus far. I think you guys are definitely on the right track, and as I look at the map up there, as kind of Patrick said there, most of this, other than 29th Avenue, didn't really exist, and I guess maybe a little bit at 44th there 10 or 12 years ago. And I think a lot of the hard work's been done, that we've established those as some of our main districts. So I like the toolkit as it applies to laying the groundwork there as we move forward. As far as the toolkit goes, I know it kind of lists out what we can do. Will it have thresholds for when we should apply some of these different tools?
Can you just elaborate a little bit
I
on
guess,
that?
you know, if we're looking at some sort of development, or if we're looking at maybe the mobility toolkit, does it, you know, I guess we're talking about 38th Avenue and the improvements going on 38th Avenue here tonight. You know, will this toolkit give us, you know, you're looking at this, here's when you want to apply it, how you want to apply it. I know it'll kind of tell us where we want to apply it, but when we want to put in those different types of bike lanes or those different types of.
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
If I can add a comment to the reason I think we ended up with a toolkit like this instead of just tools you can use in the public realm is because I think in my time here, it has been hard to advance a capital project when we aren't all on the same page from the get-go about what the end goal is. So in the spirit of a city plan, planning for what we know and creating a framework for the things we don't yet know, our goal in creating going versus staying is to hopefully invoke a habit where we as a community for every capital project are saying to ourselves, okay, square one, is this the going or staying or some sort of a hybrid of the two? So there may be a lot of other tiny little red dots on here. You know, 35th is a capital project. There may be a spot on that corridor that has more staying than going. But I think our intent with this was to create a little bit of that decision-making framework. So we get in the routine of not having to have Maria value engineer out things when we all have sort of a shared understanding. She doesn't have to be the bad guy. We all as a community understand from the get-go, are we deploying more going or more staying in sort of different areas of each individual project that you all will see over the course of the next decade or so.
And you might all remember when last time we were here, we talked about the place types framework, which we're not spending any time on tonight. But when our place types in combination with our street types, as the city plan evolves, you will see the ways in which the combination of the street type and the place type match up with sort of the suggestions for how the staying places tools and the going places tools should be deployed. So that's not to say that it is, what you'll get is sort of a, let's say a flexible instruction set. So when you see that, it won't, you shouldn't look at it and say, oh my God, well, it says at this location that it's this place type and it's this street type, and therefore we have to only use staying places or only use going places. But rather, I think to what Lauren was saying is, it'll give you more guidance on, oh, the city plan tells us this is kind of what, you know, we've all said this street hierarchy makes sense, this place type framework makes sense. When we overlay them with each other, it creates these kinds of locations. And so we've kind of all nodded our heads on that. And if we see it all comprehensively in one place, it kind of all starts to make sense. Now we have, it doesn't exactly tell us, are we going on-street parking, are we going bike lane? It may not make that decision for you, but it will give you suggestions as to how to think about that and lay down some of the guidance that's based on, you know, this is the kind of goal you would have for this kind of location, given those considerations. So it should, that's what we're aiming for.
Thank you.
Councillor Snell, or excuse me, Councillor Hobby, did you have a follow-up? Or Councillor Snell?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for this work. I'll just be brief in saying that to answer the question, yes, I understand, and it makes a lot of sense. And also, I think just providing this and thinking about it as a toolkit, we're growing, and we have new places coming online and new areas of our city that are going to be more activated. And so this makes sense to have this sort of toolkit, way of thinking about projects, way of thinking about going about things. And we can have nice things, and this is all good. So I really like this so far. So thank you for all the work.
That's going in the intro to the plan.
Okay.
We can have those things.
I think that That gets our first round of questions if you want to continue.
Okay, so I'm going to start into implementation. I'm going to kind of, well, first this, I'm going to talk through a good bit of content. We do have another discussion pause at the end, but please let me know if at any point people are confused and want to pause for questions.
We'll look for antsy hands, and I'll let you know.
Sounds good. Okay, so first though, I want to just make a quick note on this kind of imagining our future, applying tools in Wheat Ridge. So this is the section that if you were at the open house would have seen a couple boards where we're talking about our focus areas. So the focus areas are locations within Wheat Ridge where our team has illustrated how the tools that we just discussed could be applied to address issues that are common in Wheat Ridge. So the illustrations of these focus areas are intended to be prototypes for other places in the city facing similar challenges. We are not going to go into them tonight, but they are included in attachment 4 of your packet. It's just the boards that were at the open house. And it has a couple illustrations of each area and then several call outs that describe the specific application of tools, the kinds of tools that we talked about, but how they could be applied in these areas in Wheat Ridge. I do encourage you to review them and share any comments that you have or questions that you have. You can either submit, it's part of our online survey this phase, or you're welcome to just reach out to me directly. For now, we will head into implementation. You don't need to be able to read this, so please don't be panicked if you can't, like any normal person. It's definitely not visible in this form. So the city plan will include a section on what to expect for implementation after the plan is adopted. So the graphic shows just kind of the organization. We've organized the implementation steps to implement the city plan by key principles and priorities detailed in the plan. So one thing to note, this is not an exhaustive work plan like the one that you all worked with in your retreat earlier this year. Instead, this is kind of the high-level next steps to implement the priorities of this plan. It includes both short-term actions as well as more ambitious long-term actions, and they're organized into near, mid, and long-term buckets. So some of these actions are not funded. And that will therefore require future community conversations about if and how we fund them. So we expect to have content in the draft plan to provide more information on each of these, but we'll just give kind of an overview of where we think this is heading tonight. Okay, so to zoom into the details, we'll look at the set of actions to implement each principle or priority under the category of improved retail and business environment and 38th, that kind of 38th Ave Main Street concept. We have these implementations actions identified. So first, we've got a pilot for frontage improvements on commercial corridors. So if you do look through your packet at the focus areas, you'll see some illustrated ideas on the 38th Avenue ones about the kinds of improvements that this kind of pilot would look into. And then, so we'd aim to start that kind of small scale pilot in that near-term bucket in the next 3 years. And then if that's successful, we'd want to expand on it into the midterm range. We also want to support the lower, just generally lower cost of entry for new businesses, including the spaces where they operate. So we want to evaluate our zoning code and revise it as appropriate to remove barriers to temporary and short-term commercial development. We've talked about studying the feasibility of a business improvement district on 38th Avenue. And finally, Maria from Public Works came here in August to discuss that 38th Avenue refresh study and final design. And that includes streetscape improvements in the areas east of Wadsworth on 38th. That's going to be a really important piece of implementing these priorities, including the construction on that project, which goes into the midterm range. So on the next slide, we have under our network of pedestrian and bicycle facilities priority, we have several ongoing multimodal projects, some of which are already underway. In the long term, when we've implemented the improvements that we already know we need, we'd want to work on either an update to the bicycle and pedestrian master plan or just a full mobility plan. As Public Works completes the many repaving projects that they have queued up,
We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that work to implement any painting and restriping work on key segments of the mobility network. So you'll see here, we'd like to figure out a process to make that efficient, and then we hope to expand that kind of pilot to coordinate with future repaving projects. We've talked a lot in this planning process about 44th Avenue, and it's been identified as a key corridor for improvements for bike and pedestrian infrastructure. The first step before we could do really anything else on that would be a traffic analysis. So that's why you see that kind of starting in this near term, but not at the beginning, just managing expectations. But once we know what that analysis yields, we can work on implementing appropriate improvements. All of the implementation steps I've just talked about take a lot of money. Some of them are funded and some of them are not. So we're very lucky to have funds available through 2J, but we also know that our wish list for implementing our multimodal network is a lot more than what 2J yields. So we think that this long-term CIP funding and prioritization strategy is going to be a critical piece of implementing everything else here. And then finally, if you recall from our earlier mobility map, which I don't know why you would, but it is on there, we've shown a future trail connection through that Color Strand campus to connect 38th Ave to the Clear Creek Trail Network. It's a really important part for that future kind of holistic network view. So regardless of what happens on that site, we want to make sure that it doesn't preclude a trail connection at some point in the future. So we'll talk a little bit more about those two campuses in a few slides. Okay, next one. So here we have another priority for the city plan is proactive infrastructure management. We are already underway with the stormwater master plan, and then implementing the findings from that plan will be a significant part of addressing this priority. The plan also speaks to the need for emergency stormwater repairs and continue with other proactive infrastructure programs and projects. There's a little more detail on those in the full matrix that's in attachment 3. And then finally, we've had a lot of conversations in a lot of different contexts that all point to the challenge of having various utility providers that aren't coordinated with each other or with us or necessarily planning for the future. So in this kind of midterm range, we think that there's value in the city helping coordinate special districts to create a water sewer master plan to be more proactive and forward-looking. Next one. Okay. So under the planning principle of managing new development to preserve our patchwork quilt, we list that we want to coordinate with the school districts on the future of the 2 closed elementary school campuses. Specifically, we'd like to coordinate with Jeffco School District to pursue a partnership that allows private redevelopment and public parks on the closed campuses in Wheat Ridge. As we work on the set of tools that we presented earlier tonight, we know that our regulatory codes will need some tweaks to implement some of those tools in a way that achieves peaceful coexistence. So we want to take a first pass at those codes to evaluate what quick wins we can update quickly and implement in the near term. Then we'll also do a deeper dive on those codes to see what needs to happen to fully implement the goals of this plan. Based on what that analysis finds, we plan to make those bigger updates in that midterm range. And finally, of course, the city plan is only one of many recent and ongoing planning efforts. So while it may speak to the high-level direction on more specific topics, it leaves the details for those topics to those more specific plans. So implementation of all of those plans will be a part of realizing the vision of the city plan. And then looking in that long term, it's very hard to think about now, probably especially for me, but in that kind of 15-year range, that long-term bucket, we'll eventually want to start thinking about an update to the city plan and our next comprehensive plan. So that I just threw a whole lot at you. We're happy to backstep to any slides, answer questions, but generally here are a couple discussion points that were in your staff report that we'd love to hear your thoughts on.
Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. So I'm a huge fangirl of this approach. I think that this is a really great way of approaching a longer term plan in the city and framing the kind of decisions that would be ahead. But I really appreciate sort of the strategic scaffolding of the kind of decisions that we need to make and taking into account the financial resources that are necessary to enact it. So a huge fan of all of it. One thing though, if you could go back to slide 23. I'm sorry, 23 on mine.
I added a slide.
Oh,
for
okay.
this one.
Go to forward a slider there. So I just want to make note on this slide, the study feasibility of a bid on 38th Avenue. I would strongly recommend moving that towards the near term because I think the success of that needs to go hand in hand with completing the 38th Avenue refresh study and final design. Because if we get to a final design and the bid feasibility is not looking good, I think that really has a strong influence on what we can actually get done on 38th Avenue. So I'd just like to recommend we move that forward a block. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also am very excited about this approach. It gives counselors in the future to find different ways and creative ways to be able to fund some of this stuff, knowing that it's on the deck. I do completely agree with Councilwoman Hulteen, and I was part of a failed effort to get a bid on 38th Avenue, and I will tell you it's a lot of work, but I do know that we have, I own a building on 38th Avenue, and I know that there's a lot of more support for a bid on 38th Avenue than there was when we were trying to do it in 2014, I think it was. So, and I think it's important also because if we can get that bid going, through that bid is also where you can get very engaged with the property owners on that corridor about improvements. And when you want to do things like trying to consolidate long curb cuts, you need cooperation. So.
I don't see any more hands, but I would like to sort of follow up on Councilor Hoppy's. We have a really vital business community that's growing and becoming more energized. We've got good business associations and chambers that represent businesses. And I think there is a real desire to be able to coalesce around good ideas. So I think outreach to that community would be welcome. Any more discussion? I don't know if you guys are we're at next steps. So this is probably a good time to see if we have any more questions from counselors. Counselor Hulteen.
Yeah, thank you. So two quick things. One is I wish I was a future city councilor who got to work with this. I feel like this gets enacted about when I wrap up. Secondly, I want to just check the temperature of interest from my colleagues about before this comes back to us as a full package, if we could get a mobility plan specific presentation. I feel like that's a pretty key component. And a lot of the things we discussed tonight were referenced to a mobility plan. And I want to make sure that when we look at the whole package as a whole, like that just feels really important to me. So not a big study sessions. I just want to check with my colleagues to see if we get support for just looking at that individually before the whole thing comes back to us.
Councilor Hoppy, would you
I'd
want to
just
speak
like
to
to
that?
comment on that. Yeah, in the slides, it was like slide 7. There was the improving mobility, and you couldn't quite read it, but it says community interest destination, which was all the little black dots. And so, making sure that that's what we've been told from our community. And so I agree with Councilwoman Hulteen that making sure that is a part of the plan and that we can take a look at that overlay. And I do support that idea. Thank you, Councilwoman Hulteen.
Thank you.
That's all the questions I have out here. Do you have, so continue on?
Yes, and I do think that is, so what we're planning to do is, well, Eric and I have a meeting tomorrow to discuss kind of getting everything into a draft plan. The mobility piece is a lot of that. I think there's a lot of, you saw that initial framework. We need to factor in the feedback that we got to update it. But I think there's a lot of, it's not going to be a ton of content in the plan, but I think it's going to be really important. Like each word will be pretty critical of how we set that framework. It's not going to say bike lane here, not here, but it is going to give us that decision-making framework. So yeah, I'm more than happy to make sure we can have that conversation. I think that most of the plan now will be very familiar to you. So I think we can do a gut check at that point of like, how much do we need to go into the weeds on during that draft plan review? And if it's too much, you know, if we feel like we can't get to the depth, then for sure we should have an additional conversation. So I will stay in touch on that. All right, so we'll wrap up then with our next steps. Our current, we are in our phase 4 online engagement. So that survey is up until the end of the day on Friday, March 25th. So actually, if you have any follow-up thoughts on here, most of the content, we don't do a deep dive into implementation in the online part, but everything else, including the focus areas, is on there. So you're welcome to provide more thoughts there, point your constituents there. And yeah, particularly on the focus areas, I would love to hear if you do have any thoughts. So you can also just email me or reach out directly with that. Then we have our planning commission this Thursday. And other than that, we're just waiting for our responses for the online survey, trying to get a lot of people to engage with it. And that's our phase 4. So the next big step, the next time you'll hear from me, or possibly before, specific to mobility, but you'll definitely hear from me for the draft plan release for the public review. We're aiming for kind of the late spring, early summer for that. And that would put us with the formal adoption over the summer. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. And I think we just have thank you on the next slide. So thank you all for your time. We really appreciate your thoughtful input on this plan, and we're really excited to integrate your comments in and make it feel like yours. So we'll be back, and I also know you have a long agenda after us, so we will wrap up and let you guys move on. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Ella and Lauren, thank you very much for your presentation, for bringing in our CZB partners. We appreciate your presentation. Look forward to the next iteration of the plan and moving us forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are going to do a quick chair swap, and we're going to move right into our second agenda item. And this will be a discussion of the 38th Avenue West Street Improvement Project. Are you safely getting home?
Thank you.
Well, I've got the snow shovel in the car. So. Yep. All right, you're free. Okay.
Yeah.
Get it pulled up here.
This is real quick. Get that ready.
You ready to go?
Yeah, so Mayor,
Okay, yeah.
Mayor, this next item is our 38th Avenue West Improvement Project. As you know, we've been looking at this for quite some time looking at, speaking of mobility improvements, making some major mobility improvements between Kipling and Youngfield on 38th Avenue. As you know, there's a lot of sidewalk gaps, drainage issues, and other issues along that corridor. So we hired Ayers Associates to do some initial public engagement and outreach and some initial designs. Maria is here this evening to give us a rundown on what we learned from that first phase. As you know, we've hired Ayers to do the final construction drawings on this project. You've approved a contract for them, which will be about a year process. But for now, we'll give you some initial ideas of what the conceptual plans look like. Maria?
Yes, thank you, Patrick. For those in the audience, I'm Maria DeAndre. I'm the Director of Public Works. So we oversee all capital projects within the city. So tonight, as mentioned, we're going to wrap up really about a year and a half of this study that was undertaken on 38th West as we move into final design, just to kind of summarize where we are and confirm with council our next steps. So I will go through my presentation, which hopefully should answer a lot of the questions that were raised earlier, but I will come back to those that I noted at the end before I turn it back to you, Mayor, for further discussion. So this shows just a slide on an aerial view of the extent of the project. So again, we're going all the way on the west from Youngfield Street all the way to Kipling Street, and that's about 1.75 miles in length. You can see there's that slight curve there at the bend. Our two primary project goals when we started this effort were to improve the roadway to accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists. So while we know that that's a major east-west thoroughfare within our community, there's also quite a bit of people who want to walk and bike and just don't feel comfortable within that corridor. So we wanted to make sure that those folks could be accommodated, but also still accommodating vehicular traffic, both where we are now and in the future. And then secondly, improving stormwater drainage all along that entire stretch. The other element that came out through our public outreach efforts was to also slow travel speeds along the corridor. So the feedback that we got from the community was that they feel like there's a lot of people traveling that entire length, not necessarily going to adjacent homes or businesses, but traveling through, making that, again, more of a thoroughfare, and they wanted to see those travel speeds overall go down. So just a little bit of history. Again, this study, that we're here to talk about tonight, we initiated that probably in about early 2023. And so our intent at that time with this study was to complete initial, roughly just 10% design drawings to get an idea of what we were going to construct ultimately. Do a traffic analysis, and that's focused on both crash patterns as well as traffic operations, how travel moves out there currently. We completed an outfall system plan for our stormwater drainage throughout the corridor, and that's looking at where is the water coming from and where is it going and how can we better detain it and treat it. We prepared a cost estimate for what it would cost to construct all of these improvements, and then conducted 3 rounds of public outreach. You can see the dates there. The most recent one in July and August of 2024, I'll speak in more detail about. And we did talk with City Council in late January of 2024 to kind of get your take on what some of our recommendations were from a staff perspective, and that's what was presented at the July and August 2024 public outreach event. So based on that input, we showed kind of our final concept plans to the public. So our recommended direction, and this is the concurrence that we got from City Council, was a 2-lane roadway, so 1 travel lane in each direction, 1 east, 1 west. On-street bike lanes, 1 east, 1 west again. Continuous sidewalks along both sides of the street. 3 roundabouts, and we'll get into those locations and specifics in just a little bit. We're also going to narrow the lanes. So every time when the lanes feel narrower, it tends to slow down traffic. It has both a psychological effect as well as just a physical feeling that there's other things around us. That allows for more room to have not only the bike lanes, but have some buffering area between them and where the actual edge of the lane is to where those bikes might be located. We're adding pedestrian crosswalks at 3 locations. And as I mentioned previously, improving overall our stormwater piping and collection, how we get that to drain ultimately away from the road. This just shows a rendering of what that looks like. Just a couple of highlights here. So you have the sidewalks, new curb and gutter on each side. And then these are the bike lanes and with 1 travel lane in each direction. You can see the cars here. And then where possible, this is that buffering. So again, just more pavement, but with little lines on it to give us a little bit of separation between the cars and where the bikes actually travel. Oops. And then further going into that recommended direction, so what we talked about was trying to reuse as much of that existing infrastructure as possible. So not starting from scratch, not a one size, one corridor fits all, where it's just that same cross section across the entire 1.7 mile length, but instead trying to ease into it, kind of laying lightly on the land, if you will, and moving around some of that existing elements and trying to, again, reuse that not only for cost savings, but also to be conscious of how we interact with the adjacent properties. So similarly, designing around existing trees, trying to preserve those where possible, avoiding the need to acquire additional right-of-way. So there's a lot of room out there already that's within the public right-of-way. We do know that we need to acquire some in certain locations, but really trying to minimize that to the extent possible. Limiting additional lighting to just key areas, so that's like crosswalks, bus stops, that sort of thing. Not necessarily, though, putting them down the entire length of the roadway. And similarly, limiting our street furniture, irrigated areas, and other amenities, again, just to kind of make it feel like it's, again, that more rural corridor adjacent to a lot of properties, as opposed to maybe a more urban corridor or a more highly commercial area. And just, you know, overall trying to make the roadway more pleasant to travel along and across. So our outreach that we conducted in July and August of 2024 consisted of 3 block-by-block meetings. So we invited people specifically to attend those, and we also had an open house meeting. Then we also, just overall, we continue to provide our What's Up Wheat Ridge page on the city website. Overall, for the entire period, not just in July and August, but we've had overall 922 visitors to that site. In this last round, we had a survey that went out. We had 13 responses to that, and 11 of those expressed project support and excitement. So this, again, overall was very positive. Understanding, though, that there are some specifics that we need to work through with the community still. So again, just kind of summarizing roadway and infrastructure. Our intent is to stay primarily within the right-of-way. We do know that at Parfait intersection, we do need some additional land that we'll acquire. Existing infrastructure utilized where possible, improve drainage, low-impact water quality opportunities. I'll show that in a minute. And then we'll talk about the undergrounding overhead utilities. That was another element that came out of the public outreach. Is there a way to take those overhead lines and actually bury them underground, both for safety as well as just the aesthetics of having those lines overhead? From a traffic control standpoint, we talked about those 2 travel lanes are adequate to accommodate both our current and future traffic projections. And then we're going to be narrowing the travel lanes to a minimum width, minimum that's allowed through national standards, to, again, make that feeling of kind of a little bit of tightness to help people slow down. Those, what we call urban roundabouts, they're about 75 feet in diameter, would be at Tabor Court, Parfait Street, where we have an existing traffic signal, and then finally at Miller Street. We would remove the existing traffic signal at Parfait in lieu of that roundabout. So this cross-section, as it's shown, right now, it's a little bit varied along the corridor, but generally the lanes can be anywhere from probably 11 to 12 plus feet wide. This would narrow those down to a consistent 10-foot in either direction. That is allowed through national standards. And so again, it would give that feeling of coziness or tightness as you move through. These would be the buffered areas where we have enough pavement, and then the bike lanes on either direction with those sidewalks on either side. Keep going here. Pedestrian and bicycle improvements. Again, we've talked about the sidewalks. All sidewalks will meet current ADA standards. So even those where we may be able to keep existing sidewalk, if they don't meet ADA guidelines, we will need to tear those out and remove them so that the entire corridor will meet ADA. The on-street bike lanes I mentioned, those would be buffered where possible with that additional little space between the through travel lane and the bike lane. And then upgraded pedestrian crossings would be located at Quail, Lee, and then Union Court, as well as upgraded bus stops with various transit amenities. We have, I believe, 4 or 5 shelters out there right now. So looking to upgrade those, ensure that we still have areas where you can wait out of the weather, and then have trash cans and such adjacent to those. So these are just a couple of renderings showing a kind of a before or current condition, if you will. This is Tabor Court on the western end of the corridor, and then overlaid that with the proposed improvements. So you can see here, jumped in. Sorry about that. So you can see this is a fairly new development on the north side of town, and you can see the existing sidewalks that are in place are in really good condition. They're wide enough. It's comfortable. You're pulling it back from the intersection to be able to walk. So we'd like to keep that in place as much as possible. We do have left turns in both directions. And so what we're proposing in lieu of that is putting the roundabout here. And again, you can see that. And so the minimal or additional room that's needed is fairly minimal. We don't believe that we'll need any additional right-of-way at this intersection, for example. And we have the ability, these areas down here, is to provide some rain gardens or low-impact water quality improvements that will also further buffer the sidewalk from the travel lanes. So again, the feeling here is that we can accommodate this relatively easily within that and provide that slowing down or that kind of travel movement, slowing it down along the corridor. Similarly, here's Parfait and 38th. Again, there's an existing traffic signal at this location. As you can see by the marked crosswalks, you can kind of see the shadow here of the signal arms right above. And then, there we go. This shows the overlay of a roundabout at this location. So we will need to acquire land at this intersection to accommodate this. And the way that we go about that, I know that was a question from the public, is we do follow a process that's national standard. It's called the Uniform Act, where we appraise the property that is needed in relation to the larger property, and we offer fair market value to the property owner so that they are justly compensated for that amount of property. So it's not a situation where the city goes in and demands that for free, but we do compensate the property owner for any property takes. That includes easements, both temporary and permanent, as well as any right-of-way that we acquire. You can just barely see underneath here, the blue line is where the existing curb line is, or edge of pavement. So you can see that there's a fair amount of take on this corner, a little bit less here, and in these locations. The center diameter, all three of them actually, is, while it is considered to be what we call mountable, so if a large vehicle travels through here, the intent for a regular vehicle is that you divert to the right so that you slow down, so that you don't just drive straight through, but that you're actually forcing your hands to move the wheel and thereby slowing around to make that curve. With the larger vehicle, the intent is that you can go up and over this slight curb. It feels, if you were in a passenger vehicle, it would feel more like a speed hump, where yes, you could still ride up and over that, but it would feel uncomfortable if you were going fast. You wouldn't want to do damage to your car. But for a large vehicle like a bus or a fire truck, for example, they are equipped to handle this. We have talked with West Metro. There is a fire station on 38th Avenue, and they are comfortable with this design, and they understand that. And we've designed that to accommodate fire trucks and other large vehicles like that. Here's Miller Street and 38th Avenue. Here's the entrance into the Cambridge Park HOA. So you can see there that we've talked about a little bit tonight. And again, we have turn lanes here and a right turn lane, as well as onto this street down to the south. And you can see here the impact should be fairly minimal. We do show rebuilding this asphalt back up into here. But the intent was that there'd be still room for enough vehicles to queue as you're coming into the site, where if somebody, for whatever reason can't get through the gate, that they're not spilling out back into the traffic circle at all. However, we intend to meet specifically with the Cambridge Park HOA. We'll be setting up that meeting between staff and the residents so that we can go into more detail to talk about how this actually works, how the roundabout works, and what those impacts are on the entrance gate here specifically. So again, you can see that we will need to rebuild the sidewalks, but they're generally in the locations where they're currently located. And again, we're hoping to put in some rain gardens on the north edge here, if possible. And then just looking at one of the there's an existing pedestrian crossing here at Moore Street. And just looking at how we would upgrade that. So that would be the, what we call a rectangular flashing beacon assembly, which I believe is out there currently, but then connecting into the sidewalk network on either side and just giving that a little bit more presence, more advanced warning for that crosswalk as you approach it on either direction. And generally, again, just kind of enhancing that pedestrian environment. The overhead utility lines. So again, that's probably for the majority of the corridor. They're located on the north side of the street. And our preliminary cost estimate from Excel to underground them. So not only is electrical up overhead, but we also have Comcast, other cables. So all of those would be undergrounded in underground ducts or conduits. And so the approximate cost for that is about $7 million, which is on top of the estimate that was provided in your packet, and which I'll go over here in a moment. Right now, the cost estimate that was put together by our consultant shows a cost of just over $19 million for construction. This assumes full depth asphalt removal and replacement. We will, as we complete the design here over the next 12 or so months, we'll be completing more of an analysis as if we can simply do a mill and overlay, or if there will be the need to do full asphalt, essentially reconstruction of the street. By the time we remove asphalt to install the storm sewer, for example, remove asphalt to install the new curb and gutter, it may just make more sense to do the full asphalt removal and replacement. But that is a potential, some small cost savings there that we could realize. That also includes at this time, because we are so early in the design, it includes a 30% contingency in those costs. That will come down as we finalize and refine the overall design and move forward. We have included some money for land acquisition. As I mentioned here as well, we will be doing appraisals where necessary and working with our consultants to reach out to those affected homeowners and property owners to talk about how we acquire that and to work with them to get that needed land. The cost for design is included, as well as construction management potentially once we get into construction. Our overall timeframe, so we did initiate final design here in the last couple of weeks. That will take approximately 12 months to complete. So about this time next year, we'll be hoping to go out to construction. However, the project is intended to be funded by 2J, and we're still finalizing all of those costs. But so to answer the gentleman's question about timing, we're hoping fingers crossed that Wadsworth is completed yet this year. And our intent is to keep moving with design on this and other projects so that we have a continuous pipeline of both design and construction of our capital projects in the city. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments. Let me just touch if there's anyone else that I didn't talk about. Let's see. Oh, signal in lieu of a roundabout. I think that's, well, we don't really need a signal at certain locations. The intent of those roundabouts is really, again, to kind of provide 3 locations in the overall corridor of trying to get that slowing down. Again, to address that initial request from people as to how do we slow down the overall corridor speeds. And then the other question that I didn't address was property values adjacent to traffic circles. I don't have any specific information on that, but we can certainly talk with our right-of-way consultants about is there the possibility of, if there is any data on that or feedback on that. Generally, because they're aesthetically pleasing, they're not like a signal there's additional light or noise associated with them. They tend to probably be innocuous in terms of either adding or diminishing from property values. And there were 3 specific questions that were in the council packet. If you want to address this, but moving forward with final design, does this, as I've shown here tonight, does this incorporate all the elements? And is this the direction that we wish to pursue? Is there a desire to talk further with Excel about undergrounding this as part of this project? And there's any other items that we've left off that we should explore further as we go into the final design. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's very nice. A good presentation. Councilor Hoppy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the question about the undergrounding, the utility over, I mean, like if we're doing this much work in this big of a strip, it seems to make sense minus the price tag. So, and some of this funding's coming from the 2J, but we don't have the funding to do the undergrounding. And so is there a suggestion on how to find the funding for that? Because to me, and we know what budget situation we're in and what we're looking at for, then also next budget. And so, to me, I don't want to necessarily make the project wait long enough for us to find the money to underground the utility if we are able to fund the rest of the project.
There is an opportunity, so a portion of people's Excel bills goes into what's called a 1% account. Excel actually manages that money for us, and it's to be used within our community at our discretion, at the city's discretion, for projects like this. So it's called the 1% fund. I spoke with our Excel representative last week, and we have just under, I believe, $2 million. And so we can advance up to 3 additional years ahead to do that. So that could make up a good portion of it, but that would deplete our entire bank, not only what's currently in there, but up to 3 years in advance as well. So that's one possibility that we could explore further and get some more specific numbers from Excel on that.
What do we typically collect in a year in that?
I think it's, do you know off the top of your head?
$500,000.
Okay, that's what I would guess, yeah.
So we would be looking at $3.5 million on a $7 million price. Okay. Otherwise, I'm in support of this plan.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director DeAndrea. And as far as the power lines, roughly how many blocks, linear feet would that 3 million get us?
Probably about half.
Okay. I mean, I kind of feel that, yes, the money's an issue. If money wasn't an issue, I do feel that these minor arterials should definitely be priorities for undergrounding, and definitely when we're going to be tearing it up, that should be done. Another question I had was on the safety of Miller Street. So if you were at Miller Street at that subdivision and you were generally, you know, you're kind of on the north side of the street, but you're wanting to take a left turn. So taking a left turn going eastbound, how safe would that be as opposed to a roundabout?
Sure. That's a good question. So if you were taking a left out of Miller or out of the Cambridge Park HOA, you would come out here, you would actually go around the roundabout and then travel eastbound on 38th Avenue. And so you would have to pause here and look over your left shoulder to see if it is any coming traffic through the roundabout. But overall, generally, roundabouts tend to be safer in that if there was a crash there, so let's say today, or you're making a left out of there, there's the potential for traffic moving west on 38th Avenue to have a T-bone or a right angle crash there.
Yeah.
With a roundabout, it's more of a side swipe, so it's less impactful. So as we've talked about when we did kind of a roundabout overview, while there may be the potential for crashes, the severity is lessened with a roundabout because of that lesser of an angle crash. And the opportunity, again, because they're slowing down as opposed to just staying at regular speed, they're slowing down to move out of direction. And so hopefully that will move, or that car would be going slower and lessen that impact again.
And then my other question is, thank you for that. And then my other question is not on this specific intersection, but on the other one that had the existing Parfait that had the existing signal. Would you say that as far as emissions goes, when a car is stopped there, and I typically spend about 5 minutes at any stoplight, would there be more emissions at the stoplight or more at the roundabout? Which one would have the least amount of emissions between the two?
Definitely the roundabout, since no traffic ever, while most people have to slow down, there are situations, as one of the speakers spoke about, where there's such a heavy volume on the major street that the side streets are forced to stop and wait for a gap in the traffic. But generally, at any signalized intersection, you're always waiting somebody. So because of the period of the red ball length, you're always holding back traffic in some direction where they're stopped permanently. Whereas on a low volume street like this in the middle of the night, everybody's moving freely. So I would say definitely the emissions are less in a roundabout situation than at generally any traffic signal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maria, can you back up to the Parfait intersection real quick? So there is crossing there. Okay. My question was, and I guess it kind of goes along with roundabout safety, but there's a lot of kids that cross there from Prospect Valley going to various places. So, and I guess as far as roundabouts go, I think I was probably one of the other counselors that kind of scoffed a year or so ago when we started talking about roundabouts in Wheat Ridge, because it's not something we had. But, I've driven through Golden a few times to kind of get used to it. And it's actually a lot safer because you really only have to look over your left shoulder, right? You're going right. You just always have to know what's going on your left, which makes it, I would think, safer for kids crossing at that intersection. Is that?
Definitely. And as you can kind of see here, especially, especially across 30, well, in any of these approaches, but that assuming you're a pedestrian and you're crossing to this side, you're again looking over your left shoulder, seeing any cars that might be coming from south on Parfait or from 38th Avenue, and then taking that gap. Then there's a place for them to wait here in the median before looking to their right and crossing that second leg. So it's a two-stage approach to crossing the street.
I guess, my next comment / question, as we look at the design, we're hearing very little feedback about the roundabout at Tabor, very little feedback about the roundabout at Parfait, but obviously quite a bit of feedback about the one at Miller. If, as you guys move forward and you talk with the HOA at Cambridge and a lot of the residents there, is there a possibility to just delete that roundabout and keep the other two and be okay with the speed as it is with the narrower lanes? And
there is, we could also potentially, again, the intent of these is to not, it's to slow traffic along 38th. So we could also look at possibly moving it to Lee Street, which is slightly further to the west by 1 block, if our intent is to move that there and we find constrictions or a lot of opposition at Miller. So yes, it's still, I think that's a possibility that's still on the table.
Okay. Yeah, I think ultimately, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think ultimately, once they got used to it, I think that would be a lot safer to get in and out of Cambridge Park rather than trying to make that left. As far as the undergrounding goes, I had a district meeting, Councilor Weaver and I did, gosh, it's been 6 or 8 months, but one of the questions that I asked, and we had about 30 people in the room, was, and I kind of just said, raise your hand if you're for undergrounding on 38th, and I said, okay, what about 1 million, 2 million, 3 million? And we got to almost 10 million before people's hands dropped. That was that important to them. Because, you know, of safety, but also the aesthetics of it. So, you know, if we can utilize the 1% fund and borrow against 3 years and we get 3 million, we only have to make up $3-ish million on that. And maybe we can find some other way to do that. I would prefer that we do that now rather than try to go back and do it later. So that's where I'm on that. And thank you for all your hard work on this, because I think this is going to be huge once it's done. Once the design is done, do you have an estimate on how long this would take as far as construction? And
A part of that is dependent on the full depth issue or question that I raised versus just basically milling off the surface, but anywhere from 18 to 24 months, most likely.
okay, and the stretch will still be usable during that time?
Yes, there might be periods of, minor detours through the neighborhood, but the intent would be is that we would build this under traffic, meaning that traffic would continue to have to move all along 38th Avenue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hulsine.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Andrea. Couple of things. First, just to address the traffic circles. Actually, AARP has an entire website dedicated to modern roundabouts as a key safety feature and livability for communities. And there's a lot of great information there that really specifies what makes them more safe for both if you're traveling in a car or not in a car. So I would encourage people to take a look at that to get some cited safety studies and then really like illustrative diagrams of what actually makes them safer as you travel through them. Second, I agree the undergrounding feels opportunistic and important to me. We've heard from a lot of people in our community that they'd like to see more of that, and it's never easier than when you're ripping up the corridor. So I definitely support that, and hopefully when we find out, we can do a mill and overlay on that. The two sort of specific points of feedback, one is I think I'm a little confused. I think you had different intersections referenced for pedestrian crossings. You mentioned 3 in one place in your presentation. You mentioned it was at Lee, and then in another place that you demonstrate it was at Moore. Can you clarify for me where the pedestrian crossings are slated?
Yeah, so I have them based on our outreach was at Quayle Street, Lee Street, and Union Court. So.
Okay. Then what were you illustrating that was at Moore?
Yeah, so those are the new ones that we'd be adding. This is an existing one at Moore.
Okay, so those are existing versus new.
New, correct.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to make sure that when I was looking at the map, we just on the north side of 38th from about Lee to just 1 block west of Parfit, can't remember the street name, route maybe. That is where we just have so many of our housing units. And I just wanted to make sure that there's a pedestrian crossing in that segment that allows people to get to the neighborhood park and to the school. So if when you review that, if you can make sure that one of those designated pedestrian cross serves that population in particular, that would be really good. And then if you could go back to the diagram that shows the intersection of Parfit and 38th there. Is that showing the southwest corner there? Would that be taking away some of the parking? Not that I'm ever worried about people losing their parking, but Does
Yeah,
that,
it does look like it may impact that, parking right there.
okay, I just want to flag that might be difficult because those may be deeded to specific townhouse units. And so that may be a more complicated
Certainly.
acquisition and has different impact than some of the other parking we've been looking at. So I just want to flag that as a.
Good point, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. As you all know, this is a project that I've worked on along with Councilmember Snell for a decade. And that initiated because in 2014, Kaiser Foundation, we won one of 3 competitive grants in the entire state for one of the most dangerous corridors in the city. So this is a much needed project, a long time coming. Excited to see it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this, Director DeAndrea. This is great, and it is very exciting to see this. Just a couple of questions, and I was just thinking about this. Do you have any data on volume of each of the 3 intersections that are the proposed roundabout intersections?
We have traffic volumes for the entire corridor. It's about 6,900 vehicles per day.
Got it. And of those 3 intersections, which would you say would have, do you have any idea which would be the most busy?
Probably Parfait, since that's where the existing signal is. So that's most northwest traffic, because the other ones are essentially going to neighborhoods for the most part.
Right, okay. Thank you for that. My other question was around, going back to what Mayor Pro Tem Stites asked about moving the, if during the planning process, if there was a decision made to move the roundabout to Lee, would that mean then that the proposed pedestrian crossing, that would go away, that proposed crossing would go away because that's also at Lee?
Correct. We'd eliminate then that separate crossing. It would be incorporated into the design similar to something like that.
Yeah, okay, great. That helps. And then the other thing I'll just add, I also am in favor of the undergrounding. I know that that is a big price tag, but it just makes sense. So I wish I could just hand over the money, but I don't have it. I know. Yeah.
Sell more coffee.
I know. That's what we do.
All right.
Thank you.
Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. And obviously, this is a very big, important project. We're spending a lot of money on this. So it is important that we get it right. A lot of the issues that I brought up here tonight are very pivotal to the development of this thing, including the idea of undergrounding. I've seen that undergrounding is a very important part of the electric grid because, as we've seen today, when the wind kicks up, above ground power lines are vulnerable to either trees hitting them or just through over time the telephone pole will weaken, and when it's above ground it's much more vulnerable to being knocked down. So if we can find a way to underground the utility lines, it would be definitely a step in the right direction. Adding on the question on traffic counts, do we have any data maybe from the police department on the rate of speeding, that 85 percentile?
We didn't collect, I think we did collect, I don't have that information handy, I'll have to follow up with that. But we did do that as part of, with our counts, we did get speeding data along there. I just don't have that handy.
Yeah, and PD they used their black box on
Right.
at least one application, and it was one of the highest, above the 85%. I don't have the numbers either with me, but we can get.
There's
those too.
more speeding on 38 compared to other.
It was one of the
arterials.
highest in the city. Yeah, especially the west end of 38. Yeah, it was one of
Okay.
the highest. I was
That's
surprised
interesting,
myself.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well then that would certainly speak to our desire to slow people down. The other question I had, do the design plans include sound walls?
No. So typically, sound walls are typically only required when there's a federal requirement to evaluate a before and after, like on Wadsworth, the section that we're building with the sound wall, is that the noise exceeds a certain threshold by the subsequent or future traffic volumes. These are such low numbers that we're really not in that case, and we're not using any federal dollars, so we're not required to install anything like that.
Oh, that is interesting, thanks.
Mhm.
The one other thing, and that, on the stormwater, the infrastructure, the subsurface stuff. You mentioned that there are some areas where there are underground storm drains and whatnot in place. Would those be replaced, or would it sort of evaluating whether they need to be replaced or not?
Yes, there is some storm sewer already in place along the corridor. In some cases that we can leave that in place, and others it needs to be enlarged in size. Therefore, it will need to be removed and replaced. But the existing segments, if we can keep them, we'll make sure that they're in good condition. But it's fairly limited what we can retain.
And there's a history of some areas along this stretch there. When we have a heavy rain, the water doesn't go where it's supposed to.
Correct. Yeah, because we have roadside ditches, not necessarily a cohesive plan of where that water is supposed to go. It does tend to stay in low areas that then don't have an outlet or a drain to them, and so it either sinks in through the ground over time or evaporates. So this will create a continuous system to get rid of that water and outlet it to ultimately to Clear Creek in a cohesive
And that's part of the
fashion.
design.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one last question on the traffic circles. It appears that where there are bike lanes, the bike lanes end at the traffic circle?
Yes, so the intent is that the bike lanes, as you're traveling, because a bike is considered a vehicle, an actual moving vehicle, that as you approach the roundabout, you actually, as a bicycle, take the lane and act as a car and move through that. So you would essentially be where the car is and move through there and then come back into the bike lane as you get to the other side. There are options also that we can look at where you provide like a curb cut here, where the bike can ride up on the sidewalk, come around and do this and then get back on again. But bicycles tend to not take that out of direction movement. If they're comfortable being in the bike lane, then they're comfortable traveling through the roundabout.
So the understanding then is the bicycle would get behind the car in front of it and just follow the car through.
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just some comments. The first comment I'll address is, as a cyclist, I've taken the roundabout going on 32nd many times before, after the car. And generally, I would prefer to just follow through, then get off and on. I like to be very deliberate which way I'm going in. There's usually never an issue. Just be quick about it, going through the roundabout, and everything works out fine. The other comment I want to make sure that I address is I really want to applaud Director DeAndrea and the consultants for putting in the bioswales, the lid. I think that's great, aesthetically, and to help us with stormwater on a couple of those slides that you had. I don't see that very often, and I'm really excited about seeing that in the city of Wheat Ridge. I think that could have a great benefit to, enhancing some wildlife and creating just a really positive experience for people, for drivers and pedestrians. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions. Thank you, Director DeAndrea. Very nice presentation. Councilor staff has asked us to answer a few questions by consensus. Do we wish to move forward with the final design along the outline that's been proposed? And we do. That's a yes. Is there a desire to pursue undergrounding on the utility lines? We can make that happen. We have a strong yes there. And are there other items that we should explore? And I think we've had a pretty good discussion on that. So I think we probably will let the staff get going on that discussion. So thank you very much. We have a number of members of the public that have stayed with us. Thank you all very much. We're a little bit, we're about 2.25 hours into our meeting. I would like to pause for about a 5-minute break, if that's all right with everyone. So we will be back here at about 8:48, if you will. So we're going to take a short break. Thank you. Okay, thank you all for allowing us to have a little break. It's great to have everyone back with us. And I'd like to move now to our third agenda item. This is HCA Health One Rose Development Proposal. Mr. Goff, do we, you want to take it from here?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll do a quick introduction, keep it fairly short, and then I'll turn it over to Casey Goober, who is with HCA Health One, and then Lauren Mikulak, our Community Development Director, will have some brief comments as well. Then we can open it up for Q&A, if that's all right. So as you all know, we're here tonight to consider the request from HCA Health One Rose for the city to amend its code to allow for freestanding emergency department as part of a larger health park at the northwest corner of 38th and Wadsworth Boulevard. This site is the current location of the Wilmore Center and the former Midas property, which the city currently owns. The city's code would have to be amended to allow for this use, as City Council passed an ordinance in 2018 after a 2-year moratorium to prohibit freestanding emergency departments anywhere in the city. At that time, these facilities were increasing in Colorado fairly rapidly, and an application was filed with the city by an out-of-state company, which was ultimately denied by our Planning Commission. Freestanding emergency departments came under scrutiny during this time from both the public and the media due to patient confusion between these facilities and urgent care facilities, perceptions of the quality of services provided, and a lack of transparency concerning fees for services. For these reasons and others, such as the former Lutheran hospitals located just less than a mile down the road from that site, and Colorado at the time was considering legislation to regulate these facilities. City Council passed a moratorium to study the issue more closely and eventually adopted an ordinance prohibiting freestanding emergency departments anywhere in the city. The environment has changed a bit since 2018. Lutheran is now under the ownership of Intermountain Health, and the hospital has moved further west to I-70 and Highway 58. Numerous state and federal laws have been approved to regulate these facilities, and the state now licenses these facilities. Tonight, Casey Goober, President and CEO of HCA Health One Rose, is here this evening to provide more information about the company and their proposal for this health park. As I mentioned, after Casey's presentation, Lauren can provide more information on a recommended approach to amending the code if council chooses to move in that direction. So Casey, as soon as Lauren pulls up your presentation, the floor is yours. And you have the flicker. Does it work? Yep, great. And please use the microphone. Or you can come down here if you'd like, if you're more comfortable.
No, this is perfect. First and foremost, thank you guys for having us. I'm sorry that we brought a few folks, but I think anytime that we do a project of this nature, we obviously take it extremely seriously, and we wanted to make sure that you guys saw our commitment and really saw us show up for the city of Wheat Ridge. And we'll kind of go through what we're thinking the project really entails and how it's really going to add value to the city of Wheat Ridge as well as the community. So first and foremost, why it matters, and this is a little bit of a get to know me. Third generation Coloradan. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. I'm a native. I'm a buffalo. I actually got trained to be a therapy dog handler. This is Ralphie, who's named after Ralphie from CU. She comes to the hospital with me 3 or 4 days a week, and the staff absolutely love it. My family is Colorado. My wife's actually a physician at Intermountain Health. She teaches at one of the residencies here. My mom is a Kaiser patient. She has stage 4 ovarian cancer. She's been fighting that for 5 years. She just got discharged from a Kaiser facility after 7 weeks, and that was 3 days ago. And we've definitely had a mix of experiences, specifically in some of the emergency departments, waiting 6 to 8 hours to receive care while she's throwing up in a waiting room. My dad is phenomenal. He's an entrepreneur. He is now my mom's caregiver. This is them at home doing home hemodialysis. We do that 3 days a week. And then these are my 2 little kids, Landon and Charlie. Both Landon and my dad are actually Rose babies. So this is a little bit about HCA Health One. And honestly, I don't think our company really gives ourselves enough credit publicly on who we are. We are the largest hospital operator in the country. We've got almost 190 hospitals. We have 300,000 colleagues throughout those hospitals and almost 100,000 nurses. We invest over $300 million into nursing education. And then you can see a whole bunch of other stats and awards that the organization really is exceptionally proud of. We are a for-profit company, so we do pay taxes, which is very different than a lot of the other health systems in town. Our profile within the Denver metro area, Wheat Ridge area, et cetera, we're 9 hospitals. That includes a rehab hospital, that includes a behavioral health hospital, so full spectrum of care. We actually have the largest behavioral health hospital in the region. We have 5 freestanding emergency departments that Brent and Mark Kozlowski staff from a physician standpoint, and you can see kind of some of our other stats that we have. Part of also who we are from a for-profit side is we're taxpaying. So we pay almost $500 million a year annually in taxes. We do a bunch of philanthropic contributions, and we have $1.2 billion in total payroll and benefits, which is also taxed. So large organization. For-profits sometimes have the connotation of not doing charity care, not doing Medicaid care, not doing self-pay care. That is simply not true. We're actually the largest Medicaid provider in the city of Denver. There's a misconception that Denver Health is. They actually do about 10% of the Medicaid population. We do about 25% of the Medicaid population, which is a big deal. I think the other thing to note is we're really big on workforce development. We have over 110 residents throughout our hospital profile within the metro area. And one of the fun things that's coming up is we're actually going to be building a nursing school in Aurora called the Galen School of Nursing. We already have 12 of those throughout the United States, and we'll be graduating over 400 nurses a year that will be cycled into our economy and into our workforce, which will be a great thing for all of our communities. So a little bit about Rose, and I am so proud of what Jeff and Karen and essentially the Rose family kind of highlighted for you guys. I think you guys saw a little bit of our culture and again, how we show up. I started at Rose as an unpaid intern 14 years ago. Again, my dad was born there. My uncles were born there. My grandfather had his heart surgery there. Grandma, her cancer care there. I think the things that I really want to highlight on here is why it was built. It was built for everyone. There was a lot of discrimination, like the rabbi indicated. We were the first hospital to credential an African-American physician, the first hospital to credential a female physician. And we are really proud of who we are, and we really try and serve the need of every creed. We also call ourselves a drive-by hospital. I am not a trauma level 2 center. I'm not a level 1 center. I'm not a neurocomprehensive stroke center. Most people that come to Rose have to drive by another hospital to get the care at Rose because we are extremely elective and we are in the city center of Denver. That also includes our workforce. We have people now in the audience that drove from Parker, from Evergreen, from Bailey, and they choose to drive by 2 or 3 other hospitals to work at our institution because they believe in what we stand for. We are also significantly investing in women's. We just spent an $85 million capital project that'll complete in about 2 or 3 months as we onboard a few new obstetricians. I'm not sure if you guys heard the news, but Kaiser OB-GYN is actually going to be delivering all of their babies in central Denver at Rose Medical Center starting in July as well. I'm not going to go through all these. We are extremely accoladed and awarded. I think the ones that I'm really proud of, we're Denver Post Top Place to Work 11 years in a row. We're the only hospital to receive that award. I obsess over Google reviews. I think it's the most pure form of a review from a consumer perspective. If they're elevated and mad, if they're elevated and happy, if they're just driving home from an experience, we do exceptionally well on that. And then our commitment to nursing and our commitment to our emergency departments, we are magnet designated for the 3rd year in a row. And like Dawn mentioned, we did receive the Lantern Award. More awards, lots of awards. This is Rose Women's Hospital. Kara touched on this briefly. again, an $85 million commitment to women. We really do obsess on the details, whether it's T-service, whether it's doula service, whether it's the aesthetics, whether it's lactation consultants. We've got a great dedicated team that are set up to really serve the need of all of the women that come to Rose. Roughly 50% of the patients that we serve from a delivery perspective drive over 10 miles to get to Rose, which is absolutely fantastic. And then that does include Wheat Ridge. So we pulled the data on births for a rolling 12 months up into Q3 of 2024, and roughly 25% of Wheat Ridge babies that have a zip code from here actually deliver at our hospital. Here's kind of how we look at our hospital from a balanced scorecard achievement. We obsess over patient experience. We perform exceptionally well. We always start with our people and culture. If we take care of our people are going to take care of our communities. Our people are going to take care of our patients. We have some of the highest employee engagement across all of HCA, again, 190 hospitals. We actually do have the highest physician engagement out of all of HCA, which is a great testament to how we support our physician partners. And then from a quality perspective, again, we obsess over this as well. We haven't had a line infection in our ICU in over 2 years. We haven't had a hospital infection in over 1 year. And I am extremely proud to be able to consider this the place that we all work at. This is a place that we trust our friends and family. So what we're interested in doing, and I think Patrick teed it up extremely well, we've spent the last 2 years essentially listening and learning and watching. And there really are a few things that we've learned and I've learned. Lutheran is a fantastic organization, and they made a strategic decision to move more so on the west side of town for reasons that they know about. What we have seen is now there's a pretty big gap of care, specifically on the east side of Wheat Ridge, which is District 1 and District 2, as well as Edgewater, Sloan's Lake, Highlands, et cetera, for convenient care. We're also hearing choice is a pretty big deal, especially for the city members of Wheat Ridge, whether it's women's services, whether it's access to pediatric services, or access to other premier health services. Choice is a huge deal, and I think that we can help fill that need. The third is emergency service wait times. We sometimes see this in our level 1 and level 2 trauma hospitals, where higher acuity patients obviously take priority, lower acuity patients sometimes wait. We obsess about our operations at HCA, including at our level 1 and level 2 trauma centers. But specifically for Rose, I do want to point out, here are some of our operations that Don and Dr. Levy do a phenomenal job on. So arrival to bed is if you walk into our emergency department, you will be in a bed in 7 minutes at the main hospital. If you walk into our freestanding, you will be in a bed on average in 3 minutes at our freestanding ED. The time it takes to see a provider, so either an NP, PA, or MD at our main hospital, is 9 minutes. The time it takes to see a provider, which is a physician-only staffing model at our freestandings, which would be the case here, so MD or DO, is 5 minutes. If you are coming into our freestanding ED and have a lower acuity type diagnosis, the time it takes to get you home is 56 minutes. That's less than an hour. You will be treated, you will be screened, you will be taken care of, and you'll be out the door going home in less than an hour. If you're getting admitted to our hospital, both the freestanding and the main, it's 240 minutes. So the other thing that we've heard through our EMS partners, whether it's Metrofire, whether it's Denver Health, is there's now kind of what we're considering an EMS desert in Edgewater and Wheat Ridge and kind of your eastern corridor. The drive time for ambulances to get to Lutheran is simply too long to get them back to their posts so that they can service the next run. So right now what we are seeing, and Denver Health's chief paramedic is on my board, is we are seeing them divert ambulances now to Denver Health as well as St. A's because it's not as convenient as it once used to be. What we are also seeing is there's a decent amount of what we call out migration. So people, again, that have a home address of Wheat Ridge that are getting emergency care somewhere else. So if you are an outpatient emergency department visit, so going home, and you are from Wheat Ridge, 60% of your community is now leaving your community for care already. We anticipate that number is going to go up. What we also have seen is if you're being admitted for a higher acuity type ED diagnosis, you're being admitted, 50% of your community is leaving already. What we've also learned, and Patrick hit on this, is there was a lack of price transparency in 2018 when you guys decided to vote on the statute that went into place. And I think I probably would have done the same thing. There was a company called First Choice Emergency Departments out of Texas. It was private equity. It was extremely predatory, and they were kind of saturating the market. They are no longer in Colorado. They did not run their emergency departments or their freestanding EDs with board-certified physicians. It was oftentimes mid-levels. That is not our model at all. Since then, there's been federal regulation. There's also been state regulation, and those laws are in your packet, and we have to abide by those, and we take that really, really seriously as well. What I'm also really proud of, and again, I think when we put our minds to it, we really do show up for our communities. We've showed up for Denver. We actually started showing up for Wheat Ridge 2 or 3 years ago by volunteering at the Giving Tree. And actually May 9th, and you guys are more than invited as well. If you know the organization Wish for Wheels, we're going to be building out 78 bikes for the second graders at Stevens Elementary School. And as you guys know, Stevens is a Title I school. Over 70% of their kids are on food stamps, and we really love giving back to the community. So the project in question and the location we chose, a few things as well in terms of what we heard. There was concerns over sirens. There was concerns over additional traffic going into neighborhoods. There was concerns over noise around households. So 38th and Wads is one of those intersections that you guys know intimately. It's fairly busy with the Wadsworth widening project. The access is going to be a little bit more convenient, which is great. We are under an LOI for essentially 5.5 acres there. So that entire shopping center, the Midas property that you guys own. And I think what we've also heard and seen and listened to is that property's pretty tired. And I think what you guys are looking for, and Councilmember Hutland said it best, is kind of sticky centers. And we think that we can create an epicenter for health in terms of a health park, not a hospital. Convenient clinics, convenient emergency centers. We actually already have an ambulatory surgery center right behind it, so we're already in Wheat Ridge, and we partner with over 20 physicians on that specific property. We also wanted to make sure that, we also wanted to make sure that it was minimal impact to the neighborhood. So I already mentioned the noise. We were originally looking at a property on 44th and Kipling. Based on feedback from a variety of you guys as well as other people in the city, that would have had additional noise going into rooftops. Again, with this strategic place, we shouldn't have that issue. We're also seeing a pretty high traffic count of around 65,000 people per year that cross that intersection. So the visibility and access to convenient healthcare would be extraordinary. Here's our vision for the health park. So I only threw up one of these visions. We have two models. One is to do a medical office building with the existing footprint of the shopping center. Ironically, my wife's first job out of residency was an Intermountain clinic at the corner of the shopping center. This is a fantastic property. We think that we can turn this into Class A space. We would do a large capital infusion to not only purchase the land, to purchase the Midas building, to demo the Midas property, and then to build the freestanding ED, upgrade all the aesthetics, redo the parking lot, and then incorporate the Wadsworth art project that you guys have been working on for a few years. So it really does have that Wheat Ridge City Pride feel, and that integration with what you guys are working on along Wheat Ridge. We have the freestanding emergency center conveniently located at the corner of Wadsworth and 38. We've talked about a monument sign on the corner as well that would not only have our logos, it would advertise the various subspecialties that are in the medical office building. When you are getting rows in terms of ED care, we're also looking at providing women's care, pediatric care, which is a huge deficit here, and a variety of other subspecialties that not only Rose brings, but Rocky Mountain Children's Hospital brings. Swedish Medical Center brings, Skyridge brings, a behavioral health hospital could potentially bring. So you are actually getting access into a gateway to the largest provider of healthcare services in the metro region, which is a huge benefit. So we would build a freestanding ED, turn this into Class A space, and then essentially regentrify that entire corner to create a health park that is adjacent to the already existing ambulatory surgery center. We anticipate about 15 to 30 ED visits a day. So I know some of the questions that came my way over the last year or so was, what does the traffic count look like? Are the neighbors going to be mad? Are they going to hear sirens? We think the emergency department is going to be pretty minimal in traffic. Yes, we do have some ambulances come. Right now at our Central Park location, we have, I think, right around 0.75 ambulances per day, so not high volume. They definitely do not come with sirens. If a patient does need to be transported to a facility for an admission, we actually pay for that transport, so the patient isn't billed for it, which is convenient access, again, to the patient in a cost-conscious manner, which is a really, really good thing. So really, to sum it up, what I'm asking is for the opportunity for choice in terms of healthcare. I'm asking for the opportunity to provide great care to the city and county of Wheat Ridge, as well as Edgewater. I am asking you guys to consider turning over the code section 26643 so that we can bring emergency care to what we are now hearing is an EMS desert, and to a location where over 60% of your population for lower acuity is already leaving your community. And I think we can fulfill that need in a way that we also infuse the economy with some tax dollars. So I appreciate the consideration. I think if we do move forward with this, you're going to see us show up for Wheat Ridge in a big way, not just from an economic standpoint, not just from a care delivery standpoint, but we are going to get integrated in the community and show up.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Lauren?
The last bit. So what would that look like? Much of what is proposed tonight is already permitted at 38th and Wadsworth, which is zoned mixed-use commercial, where medical office buildings are permitted use. The only component that would require some reconsideration of our code is that piece related to the emergency department. So included in your packet is the prohibition that you heard Patrick mention from 2018. And then also included, if council wants to reevaluate that prohibition, we presented an approach that allows but limits emergency departments. So that approach would be to allow emergency departments not as a freestanding use, but in two specific contexts. So first, attached to a hospital that's already in the code today, or as a part of a medical campus, and that would be the new piece in the zoning code. And we've recommended a minimum of 5 acres in size. Because emergency departments often have unique circulation with both regular vehicles and ambulances, if you want to consider EDs, I'd recommend it be a conditional use. That's an administrative review, but acknowledges the need for some context-sensitive design. And then finally, if that's the approach you consider, I'd recommend it only for the mixed-use commercial MUC zone district, because that's the zone district that we know we will only ever see on a primary commercial corridor. Thank you.
Is that it? Okay. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. A long time ago, I was a freshman city councilor of all of 5 months when we did this moratorium. And I'll tell you why we did it. And it was a lot because what was happening in the environment of freestanding emergency departments is there's a lot like I think Councilmember Fitzgerald said they're selling snake oil. And it was that there were not licensed physicians, that there were just nurses, that people would go in there with like, in like heart attack state, and would then be sent to a hospital in an ambulance, and then they would get hit with the ambulance bill, and they would think that their insurance would cover it, and their insurance wouldn't cover it, and it was super predatory. And so that's why we took up the emergency moratorium. It's like one of the tools that we have as city council to be able to be like, well, put the brakes on real fast. And then why we eventually, just the licensing and everything behind it, the legislation behind it was not caught up with it. And so that's why it became permanent. I did ask some questions when we met because I wanted to make sure that if something like this comes into our community, that we're making sure that we're protecting our community from that type of thing. Things like, if you do go there and they can't provide you the services that you need, who pays for the ambulance to the other hospital? Rosewood was the answer that I got. Things like, we now have legislation that the pricing has to be clear, right? They have to tell you if they accept your insurance or not. And I also sit on a board, the Jefferson County Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors, and the CEO of St. Anthony is on that board, and he's talking about how very busy they are since the move and then since the thing with Kaiser. And so this would really significantly, I feel like, help our community in those pieces, and then the additional pieces about like the women's services that would be offered. So I'm saying all that because I wanted to give you a piece of the history of why we went there, and then to also say that I was very skeptic, and I was very like, I even told Patrick, why are you even trying to tell me to go talk to this person? I was there in the first place. And he's like, well, there are a lot of things have changed. And so I'm just saying that because as a skeptic, I have changed my mind because the landscape has changed. And I think it'd be really great for our community. And so I just want to say that I'm supportive of this. I wanted to let you know why I have now decided to change what I put on the books a long time ago.
Thank you. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you so much. I just really want to thank everyone for coming tonight and sitting through 2 hours and 15 minutes of long-range planning and corridor planning with us. So this is in District 2, the proposed site, and I was not here a long time ago with Councilor Hoppe when it all started. I'm enthusiastic about this. I agree the word was used as that corner is tired. The Midas building is another thing. The reason I like this approach is that it's a comprehensive approach. We're not just looking at standalone emergency rooms as an individual business, but actually looking more comprehensively. When I was running a couple years ago, and then a year and a half ago when I was out canvassing for other people running in that cycle, the community members immediately around Lutheran are really concerned about losing that immediate access to emergency care. I mean, at the time I was like, well, the new hospital is world-class hospital and it's just a little further down the road, still in the community. But for people in that immediate neighborhood, it's a real tangible loss to them, and something that they've expressed real concern about. So for my constituents, I think this would really address something that they've expressed concern about. And I just appreciate Rose presenting itself holistically as not just a company that drops a building, but rather, a organization that cares for people and people in communities. So I think I'm supportive of this approach. My only hesitation, I'm just going to register here, not having anything to do with Rose, but with the medical use 5-acre regulation. I found myself wondering where else in the city could that land, and would we end up creating an attractant for exclusively that type of use at the expense of other uses in those locations? And I think, Lauren, you would know better than I, but I didn't feel like there were two. That would be my only concern, is if we create this specific type of use, are we creating a magnet to become a place where these medical campuses flourish, when in fact we're working on a comp plan, when we're really trying to diversify our commercial corridor? So that would be my only registered concern. So Lauren, if you could maybe speak to that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. You're right. We don't have a lot of developable land that would meet the MUC and 5-acre criteria. Is it possible that there's a piece on Kipling that isn't zoned that yet? That could be conceivably, but I think we'd be putting it into a pretty tight box with this approach.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because this is a pretty big commercial corner, and Patrick, maybe you can talk about this a little bit. What kind of tax revenue can the city look for from a development like this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have those numbers. Health One has not shared those with me. I was going to look up, I didn't get that done for today, what we're currently generating there, which, can't really share. It's confidential information, business by business, but there's only a few currently tax generating businesses in there, right? There's a pizza, liquor store. I think everything else is pretty much medical related today. Subway. Yeah. So, I've been thinking about that. Yeah. I believe it would not be a decrease. I don't believe. But I don't have those numbers with me today.
Okay. So, but it will generate some sales tax and.
Yeah, there would be some sales and use tax. I just don't know how much.
Okay. I'm generally supportive of this. I think this is a good use for that campus, and I think, as Councilor Hulteen said, I've walked a lot of those neighborhoods around there. That's right across the street from District 3, and there are a lot of people concerned with Lutheran gone now that there's a hole, and it's not just that neighborhood. It creates a wider gap between emergency services. So, and the fact that this brings in a lot of new women's services and things like that to the community, I think this is huge. So, I am supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm?
Thank you, Mayor. I have some questions for Director Mikulak. So the first one is how many urgent cares are in the city of Wheat Ridge? I'm guessing zero.
Zero. Yeah.
Okay.
Urgent care?
Yeah, urgent care. Yeah.
We have one? No.
In the city?
There's occupational on the frontage road. No urgent cares. There are in the surrounding. Lakewood has a couple. Arvada's got a couple. Denver has one just east of us.
But zero in the city of Wheat Ridge?
Zero Wheat Ridge, yes.
Okay. And then the kind of back to the city plan, it talks, we didn't talk about that in our past number 2, but it talked about the Wadsworth Shopping Center is the retail commercial corridor, which was why we didn't want to cannibalize that and not have commercial in the Lutheran Legacy campus. And so a couple questions are, one, how does this use align with that? And number 2, also, what is the maximum height that you could build on this, in the MUC on this property? Like how many stories, I guess I'll say, or height, whatever is easiest to.
You're quizzing me on my zoning code. I'm pretty sure it's 4 stories for single use, 6 stories for vertical mixed use development. So quite a bit more allowance on Wadsworth than we're generally seeing. And then in terms of mix of uses, I think our overall policy goals in the last 15 years for Wadsworth have been to achieve a mix of uses. So we don't try to prescribe exactly, how much service, retail, restaurant, and residential. But in general, I do think this is aligned with our currently adopted goals of having a mix of uses on Wadsworth.
That this would be?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think you kind of preemptively answered my other question that I haven't asked it, which is if the moratorium was removed, how many more freestanding ERs? And you talked about the 5 acre as being part of it, and it would have to have some type of, I guess, ancillary or combined use, which is a medical center, correct?
Right. So in the approach that we proposed, there'd be sort of 3 boxes to check. It'd need to be property that's owned, mixed use commercial. It'd need to be at least 5 acres in size. 4 boxes to check. It need to be part of a medical campus, and the conditional use permit would allow us to look at circulation and things like compliance with adopted plans.
Okay. Thank you. And then my overall comments are just that, when we had the Lutheran campus where it was, then I think everybody kind of got used to ambulances every now and then. We also had helicopters flying over, and that's all gone. That's over on the far west side now. But the trade-offs are going to be that we're going to have a Lutheran Legacy campus, which is going to have some traffic. So there's trade-offs. And so now I think, the questions I can see my constituents asking is like, and we've heard from the applicant, is there going to be noise? I'm not so much worried about traffic. We already have Wadsworth. It's going to have traffic in 38th, but is there anything in the code, Lauren, that would prohibit, the sirens. Because I just think, we've taken away some of the sirens. I mean, yes, we already have like West Metro Fire, we hear the ambulance from West Metro Fire. But if this is going to be something that is stationed there, is there anything in the code that would prohibit sirens? Especially I would say that the biggest thing is going to be at night, like really kind of prohibiting the sirens coming to that site. Because there is residential to the north. There's, I don't know how far that is, but there is definitely residential very close to the north.
Most of our noise ordinances reside outside of the zoning code. But again, part of the reason the conditional use permit we think is appropriate is it allows us to have the applicant document a lot of the circulation and impacts. So one of the criteria for a conditional use permit is the compatibility of the proposed use with existing and proposed adjacent uses in terms of scale, site design, and operating characteristics, including traffic generation, lighting, noise, and hours of operation. So it gives us the additional level of review to understand the potential impact and any potential mitigations that we could negotiate if needed that are sort of out of the ordinary of that context.
Because it'll be running, the hours of operation are 24/7.
That's my understanding.
Right.
Yes.
So is there a solution is there any way that you could?
I mean, if this were to advance, I think Wadsworth is what it is. I don't think this is a impact that's likely to be greater than what's already generating on Wadsworth. Our team would usually ask the questions of sort of how long are your sirens going? Is it the entire duration? Is it only as you're approaching an intersection? We have a lot of those kinds of questions that we ask an applicant to document so that we can understand what the impact would be relative to what our existing conditions are at that kind of an intersection.
Would staff consider, because this does have sirens, that's my biggest concern, would staff consider sending out some type of postcard survey to the nearby residents and seeing what?
We have not done that. There's not a public process associated with a conditional use permit. It's just a additional layer of review and criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this presentation. Couple of clarifying questions for me. First one, it looks like the main entrance to get to the emergency facility is off of 38th west of the intersection. Is that correct? Because the parking for the dentist is on the north side.
Probably Cason's for
So
question.
I think these are mock-ups. So there's also a dental building, which we're in contact with. It's two brothers that live out of state that may actually want to sell. So depending on how that goes, we can reconfigure it. Or if you guys have feedback on how you want the entrances, what I would recommend is you partner with our EMS liaison or our physician, and we can work it out with you guys. It's not like we're set on this exact standard.
And none of that's been brought through the Lauren's process.
sure.
So,
Yeah.
she would address all those points if this
Got it.
moves forward.
But we're happy to partner with you guys.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Other question, we were talking about other businesses in this part. I think there is just a handful. There's Subway, there's a dry cleaner. You said pizza. Are those, liquor store. Would those businesses relocate or go away or stay or?
Yeah, that'd be between, if they move forward with purchase, that'd be between them and the business owners. They have leases, I'm assuming, so you may want to answer that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So we have the rent rolls. I think the longest it goes out is maybe 2 or 3 years from what I remember offhand. If people are interested in them, we would need to get them a new rate, especially after we turn this into Class A space. It is going to look dramatically different than what it is right now. But again, we're willing to partner with people to help find them homes if it's not on that campus.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep.
I think that's it for questions. I'm really happy about this, considering this is right across the street from District 1 and thinking about travel times to get to emergency services. That's something that you hope you never need, but when you need it now. And I know that it would be a really short drive over, from most spots in District 1. And I just think this fills a really big need in our city. And I'm really pleased with just how this is unfolding. I am really impressed and so grateful for everyone to stay so long. And welcome to Wheat Ridge. We've got lots of great businesses, and I'm sorry that you're sitting here instead of going to get some great food on 38th Avenue or somewhere. But yeah, this is great, and I think this shows a commitment to community. And I think in Wheat Ridge we are very dedicated to making sure that community kind of is woven through everything. And you've already demonstrated just how you'd like to be invested in our community, and I think that goes a long way. And it is also really nice to have choice. That's always, in every facet of life, it's nice to have that. So I really am appreciative of this, and I am in favor of moving forward on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I agree. The timing on this effort is pretty darn good. By the time this thing, if it gets going, it will be when the Wadsworth project will be complete. And as I've said from the beginning, once Wadsworth is in place and the landscaping is done, it is going to be quite an attraction in terms of getting businesses to be interested in that corridor. Anyway, as this thing came up and I read into it, I did notice that there was I went all the way back to the Planning Commission meeting in 2015, and I just wanted to see what the concerns were. And reading through the minutes of that meeting, it was pretty apparent that a lot of the concerns then are the same concerns we have now around traffic and noise and whatnot. The difference being the context that Councilmember Hoppe mentioned in terms of licensing, in terms of some of the controversy that had surrounded that industry back in those days, and it is very nice to hear that that part of it has kind of gone away, and there isn't that sort of concern over freestanding emergency rooms. The objections at the time were primarily from people from Lutheran, and to me, right on the surface, it sounds like they were worried about competition. But it sounds like now with their move completed, it is the fact that we have an area in the city that is, frankly, the crossroads of Wheat Ridge that will now be considered for a freestanding emergency room. I think that it says a lot about sort of how we see that corner of the city and some of the things that will carry us into the future. I guess my first question is, if you look in the chart that is provided in terms of suggestions to amend our city code, in the past it said the freestanding emergency room is prohibited, and it included the zoning classifications for those types of uses. And hospitals obviously are not permitted in residential and industrial areas. Likewise, freestanding emergency rooms would not. But there's only one area that conditional use for a freestanding emergency room would be allowed, and that would be mixed-use commercial zone. And I understand why it probably wouldn't be appropriate in the transit-oriented development MUC zone, but I'm wondering if there might be opportunities in the mixed-use interstate zoned areas for some competition, frankly, for possibly another facility, because it seems like freestanding emergency rooms just make a lot of sense for a lot of different ways, but economically would be one of those. And so I guess that's my question. Would we not want to include mixed-use commercial interstate as a conditional use?
We'd be happy to take that direction from council. I think I'm flipping through the use chart, and the mixed-use interstate zone district, the way it's differentiated from mixed-use commercial, are some of the larger format retail uses that we don't allow on our smaller corridors. So certainly an option.
Okay.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Mr. Goff, you've heard some discussion on this. Does this give you enough information, or how would you like to proceed?
Yeah,
direct your
tonight
staff?
we're asking for council direction, if you would like to move forward with a code amendment. If so, we'd like to actually have a consensus on record. And if it's as proposed from Lauren, or if you have any changes to that, as Mr. Larson just suggested.
Okay, so do we have, just based on this proposal that the staff has brought forward, you have consensus to move forward in that direction without any really further changes? And maybe we evaluate the interstate proposition, EMU interstate? No?
I don't consent to evaluate the interstate piece, but I do consent to the what was presented by
Okay,
staff.
presented by council, and we had a unanimous consensus to move forward on that. Mr. No,
Concerns the twofold. It's number one, the sirens. It's a really quiet neighborhood, and that's my number one concern. And not having the public, the neighbor, the communities have an understanding of like, this is what's going in. I don't want to surprise them in my district that they have no say, they weren't notified, and now they have an emergency room. I don't think that's fair. And I also have a little bit of reservations of what that corner is supposed to look like. You know, if right now it looks like it's going to change a little bit, but I don't know. There's opportunities. We have a certain limited amount of opportunities in Wheat that we've voted to take pieces out of the height and density charter, and that's what I really would wish that we could water more of. We're running out of room. We need to do some more vertical. Unfortunately, this project is not doing that. So thank you.
Just to clarify, Mr. Ohm, this would be if we move forward, this will require a public hearing in front of planning. This is in chapter 16.
Yeah, the amendment of the code would require public hearings before planning commission and city council. Any future development application under that code would not require public hearing.
Yeah, I was just making the point that there will be a process for this neighborhood and anybody to comment at public hearing.
To amend the code.
Councilor Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just was wondering, Casey, while you're here, maybe you could speak to Councilmember Ohm's concerns about what the ambulance traffic looks like at typically at one of your already existing freestanding emergency.
Yeah, so if an ambulance is coming in, very, very, very rare lights and sirens because they're lower acuity items that aren't going to a hospital. If they are coming out and it is a heart attack, frankly, you want lights and sirens on, but those are very few and far between. But if it's a STEMI, if it's a stroke, you are wanting those patients to get to a higher acuity facility as quickly as possible, and there may be a light and siren once, twice a month. If that, Central Park, it is exceptionally rare, which is where our freestanding is for a lights and siren. If people are concerned about what I would say is elevation to the buildings, we don't have plans right now to go up 2, 3, 4 stories. If we were to tear down the existing shopping center and build a brand new medical office building, which we do have renderings for, it would only go up 2 stories to be respectful of the neighborhood itself. We're trying to be extremely conscious of the neighborhoods around it from a traffic standpoint, from a lights and sirens standpoint, from a noise standpoint, from a view standpoint, just because we want to respect what people have.
That's all we need this evening, yeah. Lauren will prepare this for planning commission first. It'll have to be advertised in public hearing, and then it'll come to council.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for this discussion. Thanks to the visitors that came and spoke about this. We appreciate that. That concludes all of our study items tonight. We have staff reports. Mr. Goff.
Nothing else this evening. Thank you.
Okay. And we have an opportunity for elected officials' reports. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry to take a little bit more time tonight. I know it's been a long night for everyone. So when we reconvene here in 2 weeks, it'll be our annual legislative meeting with our elected or our representatives at the state capitol. And unlike previous years, this year we have a legislative committee with our own legislative agenda and priorities. This last Thursday, the mayor and council member Larson and I met along with Cole, and we have identified at this point 3 priority bills that we're going to be contemplating for taking action on. Because many of us are in DC next week, we are going to be meeting again this week to review these 3 bills. And our intent will be at the meeting on the 17th for us to present to our representatives what the city's priorities are under the dome, and how we hope that this legislation can be contemplated in such a way that it really advances the interests of our city. So the 3 bills that we will be discussing this Thursday are HB 251032, improving infrastructure to reduce homelessness, HB 251272, construction defects in middle market housing, and SB 25001, cover to voter rights. We have selected those. I'm guessing from the bill titles, you can identify that those are in alignment with priorities within our city, and this council is identified as particularly important. One of the metrics we are using for selecting these bills is really looking at, first and foremost, like, how do these bills impact our city? If we're simply just aligning with CML's position, we're really hesitant to put city staff into it. But if it's a bill that's CML is taking an amend position, and we have either a furtherance of that amend or maybe a slight difference of what the amendments to the bill could look like, then that's where we'd like to enact our staff to start taking a more proactive position under the dome. So because we don't have an opportunity, because we have a limited schedule this month, we are not going to have a chance to come to council officially to ask for your support for those 3 bills. So there is no official action in council matters, but I wanted to let you know those are the 3 bills. And I hope that you guys are supportive of those 3 bills right now as our top priorities. I welcome you to reach out to any of the 3 of us if you want to discuss it further, but we are looking forward to being back here in 2 weeks and discussing it with our representatives and taking a more proactive approach. So I think, let me just check all my notes from tonight. I think, the ADATs are having their annual meeting on Wednesday, and several of us will be there. As we are familiar with tonight, there's a lot to talk about, both to celebrate from what's behind us and to get engaged in what's ahead. So if you weren't already planning on it, it's 6 o'clock, I believe, at New Image Brewing. And I'll be there. So I hope to see you there too.
Additional elected officials reports. Councilor Snell.
Really quickly, also would like to extend an invite to everyone. This Friday, the Cultural Commission is holding a free event at the Wheat Ridge Center for Music and Arts. And it's a mixer and art sale, and the art comes specifically from the Lutheran Legacy Campus. And it was a gift from the Lutheran Foundation. And so you'll have an opportunity to come pick out a piece of art and take a piece of Wheat Ridge history to your house. And there's also refreshments and just a good time to come and hang out with us. There will be a few other goings on because it is First Friday. So there will be several other events right there on 38th Avenue. So please come join us from 5 to 8 at Wheat Ridge Center for Music and Arts, which is it's housed inside the Methodist Church there at 38th and Watts. And that's all I have. Friday. Yep. Thank you.
Further elected officials reports. Hearing none, we will not be here next week because we have, many of us will be in Washington, D.C. at the National League of Cities, but we will be here back 2 weeks from tonight for another study session. So thank you all very much for your attendance today. We had a great meeting, and we will stand adjourned.